Someone once told me the grass is much greener.
A lot of people are watching along with us.
Things are going to be taken a lot further.
It does keep the flow really, really nicely, which makes it a show that was really ahead of its time.
Where's that petrified eyeball at now? Who's had it last?
Macy is amazing, and she doesn't care about what other people think about her.
Don't you feel like maybe Dodie represents the instinctive, animal, ugly part of us?
I might have just been having a bad day when I gave it the meh.
At Camp Caprice, we don't sing mooses, we sing these.
Someone once told me the grass is much greener on the other side.
Okay, so the episode begins with Darin visiting his orthodontist for the last time, with him stating that today is going to be the start of a new day, the first day for the rest of his life. And it turns out to be the day where he gets his headgear removed. And it's a very clever way that we don't actually get to see his face when the headgear is removed. And every girl is saying like, ooh, looking good, Patterson. And then finally we see Darin climbing up to Ginger's window and saying surprise, and Ginger's not really paying attention until finally when Darin says, if you actually notice me, maybe you'll actually notice me. And then when she looks at him, she says that he's became totally hot.
I think this scene is really well done. The whole build-up, and then to the classic, Darin shows up at her window, which to me is why I predicted that they will ultimately end up together. That's not a spoiler because I don't know. It may be true, but they have these really cute scenes where he climbs up to her window and he's just there in her windowsill, and so they replicate that again, but he's got the headgear off. I just thought it was such smart writing, and the way they visually tell that story is fantastic.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. You kind of know what's happening, right? Like, obviously he's at the orthodontist, and you know that he's gotten his headgear off, but you kind of have this anticipation of, like, well, what's he going to look like now? Like, it's hard to even picture the character without his headgear. You get so used to seeing him, with it. It's like his staple thing, and, sort of the way, and, as the episode progresses, we kind of see how, even though at this point things are still the same and he's still dropping by the window, how things get a little messy there in the middle.
Yeah, definitely.
There are some amazing quotes in the Carl Hoodsey Brandon plot of this episode. I'm obsessed with, Carl goes, "Is your monkey, like, dead?" Just so deadpan. And then later he tells Hoodsey that he's blubbering like a whale. And Hoodsey goes, "Whales don't actually blubber, Carl. They have blubber." And what a fantastic line, and, obviously evoked the likeness of Doug Dimmadome, which I'm sure, was probably after this episode, but you can't think of blubber without blubber nuggets.
This is true.
Blubber nuggets, they're chewy!
They are chewy. And then, the last quote I wanted to say, they're spying on Brandon. Or no, they have a security camera system set up already in Brandon's room, right?
All over the house, except for the bathroom.
Has it? Right. So yeah, Carl and Hoodsey don't set it up. It's just a part of Brandon's house. And they see him, like, saying his prayers before he goes to bed. And it's actually a really heartwarming scene, as much as we all have different opinions on Brandon. And Carl's like, okay, skip ahead. And Brandon is sitting there with them, and he goes, "No, you'll miss the part where I bless you and Hoodsey." just so tender. What a moment.
Yeah, it's one of his more likable moments. He's a lot to handle. This is skipping ahead quite a bit, but there's a great line that happens later where Brandon's like, "Without the monkey, I'm just an annoying little boy." And I was like, yes indeed.
Darin goes over to Miranda's house and hears her play the clarinet, and then they start having their argument about how he's not allowed to see Ginger because Miranda doesn't like Ginger, and that she's making a lot of sacrifices by not seeing Courtney. So they have this little bit of a tense disagreement with their friends.
I have seen this in real life, even in, like, adult-ish, I guess, like, college-aged relationships. This problem definitely happens. I know of a lot of people who don't like their significant others to hang out with people of the same gender, right? Like, or of opposite gender, rather. Like, I've had friends who are like, "Oh, you can't hang out with him, you can't hang out with her." Like, these things definitely happen. And definitely, too, just the balance, like, the the life relationship balance is always really difficult of, like, how much time you spend with one person versus another, and I felt the realness of that moment.
Totally. Since I'm the derailment guy, another thought just popped in my head that Ashli and I hadn't really noticed until this watch through. I must have known at some point, but Grey Delisle is Brandon? Like, oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah, the range of her voice, honestly.
Yeah, that blew my mind. And you totally hear it, but I thought it was more different than most of her other characters, so I didn't really notice it, because we don't hear Brandon talk that much until this episode. It's crazy.
This one was originally aired February 17th, 2002, written by Eryk Casemiro, who's actually here with us this week on the podcast to discuss it with us, and it's apparently his favorite episode, so we're excited to have him.
Thanks. That's very nice.
All right, so right before we discuss about the episode, what was the inspiration for it?
Well, when I was when we were looking for Ginger stories, we'd all sort of recapped our own lives as teenagers. And I remember, like, the Judy Blume books being really, like, coveted. And I had friends, girlfriends then, who weren't sort of, like, ready for some of that. And it always sort of stuck with me. And then I personally had modesty issues as a kid, so Hoodsy's story came very naturally, of course. And it was a really, it was an examination of your body and how, you have to sort of face facts at a certain point that there's just a reality to your body. And, so that's where it sort of came from.
Yeah, this brought me back to my middle school days. I remembered the time where this video was going to be a thing, right? Because everyone has one. Everyone has this this talk. It happens in your life. And I remember, it was the talk of the town. Like, everyone's freaking out about it. And this felt so real to me, this episode and this moment of them just sort of freaking out about it. Very much how my real life experience was.
Basically, Courtney just approaches Ginger saying that this is a very important video to watch, and anybody who's anybody has to watch it. It's pretty much mandatory to watch it. And she really becomes incredibly snobby in this episode. I mean, we kind of have some moments throughout the series at this point in which we do kind of see her acting pretty ignorant, but at the same time, we kind of give the defense that she lived a pretty sheltered life. But here, it really seems like she's pushing Macy into, like, oh, you need to watch this, otherwise you won't grow up. And the same thing with Miranda, but that's to be expected with Miranda acting really, really pushy to Macy. But yeah, here we actually have Courtney kind of like being like the little antagonist in this episode.
Well, she can't always be nice and innocent.
Usually she seems a little more well-intended, but she's never been like the good, nice girl of the group, necessarily.
Not at all. She was always our sort of mean girl in training,
Yeah, not quite Miranda level.
No, not Miranda level at all. She's a riot girl, really.
Brandon trades his monkey's baby tooth in exchange for the gum. And then when the gym teacher sees that he's chewing gum, he starts off by saying, okay, take out your gum and put it into this giant box that's filled with already pre-chewed gum. And then Brandon puts it in, and then he tells him, okay, now you take one out and chew the piece. It's like, oh man, that is so gross.
That's right out of my life in my middle school. Including the teacher's name. It cleared legally, so I can actually say he was our teacher who made us do that. So as you know, no one ever chewed gum because that was just so wretchedly disgusting.
Did you ever actually see somebody like actually have to chew it?
Oh yeah.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Really gross. When I put it in the script, originally Brandon had to chew the gum. Network was like, no, that's just too disgusting. I'm like, well, all right, well, it's real life, so okay.
I was watching this and I was like, there is no way that anybody's school would let that happen, and apparently I'm wrong. So.
Well, I don't think he stayed long in the job.
I would hope not.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. I was also wondering, and maybe my schools were just different, I never actually had to take showers in gym class. Is that a common phenomenon for other people? It was never required for me. Never, even throughout high school. Like, we just never had to? Is that a common thing that happens? I don't know.
Yeah, we had to, and I went to a public school, like in a small town, sort of middle-class town, nothing special, but the teacher, it was mandatory. He sat in the locker room with the attendance slip and checked everyone off. was really weird. Honestly, this is the most autobiographical story of all of them that I wrote, because it just sort of wrote itself, really.
Wow, that's really, like I said, for me, that part was very much not my life, and I was like, I'm sure this happens, but yeah, I guess cool to see that the inspiration is pretty literal.
Yeah, totally.
Continuing with the story, so we have Carl, who's pretty much killing it with playing dodgeball, and the coach is really impressed with him and kind of sees him as like his kind of prodigy in some cases, and then Hoodsy just feels like he's left out, mostly because he doesn't do well with the dodgeball and that he doesn't take showers, like all the other guys. Tries to come up with some excuses saying like, oh, I have this skin disease that if I shower it comes out, and oh, I barely worked up a sweat, and the gym teacher's sort of not buying it, but it does feel really relatable that there are some people out there that do not feel comfortable with stripping out and having to do certain things. And we even see this nice scene in which when he's talking to Joanne about how his father is, he dresses himself in the closet. It's like, wow, that's pretty insecure.
I got totally clocked because I stole from real life there, too. A very close family friend. It was the mom of the family, but she was this nice Irish woman, and she only undressed in the closet.
Wow.
And when she watched the show, because her grandson was of the age of the audience, I was totally clocked. They knew I had stolen that story. God damn.
Oh, that's fantastic. Ugh. Boy, I do remember, because obviously we would still wear gym clothes, right? And I do remember there was a lot of, like, girls who would be like, I don't want to change in front of everyone. Like, that was definitely a thing where, like, they were like, I'm going to go into the bathroom stall. I don't want people to see me. So, like, definitely that was real. I don't think people, you kind of got over it. But, yeah, wow. Dressing in the closet every day, that's dedication.
And what really struck to me was in the scene in which when Lois was talking about her old friend that she used to hang out with in college, and that as time went on, they just kind of went their separate ways. And they occasionally talked to one another. And, that's definitely real to me, because pretty much everybody that I knew in middle school and high school, I don't even speak to anymore. Maybe with the exception of one person, but even then we briefly talk to one another every once in a while. And even then, I mean, even with Ginger saying, I don't know how I would feel that way if it was, with Dodie and Macy, it's like, I thought to myself, man, I don't know how I would feel that way if I was to have a similar relation like that with Kevin, because he and I have been best friends for over 20 years. It's like, man, if we just have like, oh, we talk to each other on the phone or on Facebook every once in a while, it's like, that would be kind of a bit of a strained relationship. But I kind of definitely understand where, in the sense of, when you move on, you like different things, you meet up with different people, and you just take a different path.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, Casey and I have been friends since high school, and we've stayed much more in touch than either of us ever expected to. But for the most part, yeah, I'd say you make new friends, you lose some, and that's sort of how it goes. And I mean, when you're there, it's always hard to say, like, in the future, I might not be friends with these people, but yeah, definitely struck a chord with me as well.
There's not really much to say. I guess we can finally cut into, when they finally watch the film.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it's very similar to when we were discussing about in Dare I Darin about them learning about the pituitary gland. It's like, now we get to see the changes of a woman. We have the talk.
I was stunned that this was allowed on TV in a kids show. Like, I was so unprepared. Like, I was not prepped for the period reference, like the direct reference to like something about like you'll have a monthly visitor, and I was so unprepared for the birth scene.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry.
No, it was okay. It was almost just like, I was like, oh my god, this aired. Like, oh my god. Like, I was stunned.
The takeaway so far is that you are our Macy in real life, aren't you?
Well, I mean, it's like you said before, Ashli, Macy's your spirit animal.
Oh, she is. I'm definitely not like a high anxiety person normally. I was not ready. I was like, I was expecting it to be like, I don't know, like a quick like clip in and out sort of scene. I was just not prepped for that detail. It was, wow, it was something.
Well, we were very careful. I mean, I think that part of the script probably went through the most scrutiny across the broadcaster. But the argument was, this is a show about real stuff. You can't really sand the edges too much because it's the climax of the story, and we gotta at least. It would be too easy to end the story with the way it does with Courtney if it wasn't so explicit, you know?
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciated it. Like I said, I was surprised, but no, it was cool to, like I said, just in the sense that I'm glad you guys made that choice too. It's definitely, you know, one that I'm sure a lot of shows shy away from, and I think that's, again, part of what we really love about As Told by Ginger is how much it doesn't shy away from the realities.
Mipsy cuts in front of Ginger and saying, "Oh, thank you for letting me cut in, Ginger." Like they always say, nice girls finish last. And, you know, especially when Ginger and Dodie and Macy find out that there were no more seats, Ginger starts being a little bit confused. It's like, nice girls finish last? And she kind of gets a little bit more concerned about her own reputation as being a nice girl. And she's wondering about what she's going to do about it.
Since when is Ginger caring about being nice? Like, since when has this been a concern? Like, I just feel like this is so out of character for her in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like she's always been fine with being a nice girl. And, like, we've had several moments already where she's not like the mean girls, but, like, all of a sudden it's, like, this huge concern. Like, I'm nice? I don't want to be a nice girl. And, like, I don't know. I just... I got so annoyed a lot of this episode.
Yeah, I have to say that this is definitely one of the most out-of-place moments for Ginger. I mean, we've already seen in various episodes, such as Deja Vu, in which she did so well in impersonating Courtney that she thought that she was Courtney. And, you know, she pretty much just snubbed off Dodie and Macy. If something comes along, she can be really over-obsessed with it. Trying to be like Courtney. Trying to see if she can be able to throw a Hanukkah party and then go and split off even Steven. And also trying to see if she wants to hook up with Darin. So, yeah, I never really saw her as, like, overly, superly sweet. This is definitely one of my least favorite Ginger plots, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to disagree with you guys. This is actually my favorite episode of the entire show, and I think Ginger is absolutely within character.
I hate you.
I'm just trying to manufacture some drama because I feel like we always agree, but I do agree with you guys. No, I think it's completely out of place. The episode itself, I don't mind, but it's hard to buy the episode when you don't buy the entire framing of it, you know?
Yeah, I think this is one of the few times, or maybe not one of the few times, but at least one of the first times in a long time that I can say, without a doubt, the Carl and Hoodsie plot I found way more enjoyable and was way more interested in than the Ginger plot. The Ginger plot, I was like, this is stupid and annoying, and I liked the food cart business thing. I was like, you know what? I could see Carl actually being really good with food somehow. Like, he's always good with, like, messing around with things, and I think sort of the gross out name thing, it suits him really well, and I liked watching that business and it sort of, unfolding. Whereas Ginger, I was just like, this just doesn't feel like her.
Yeah, whenever Carl and Hoodsie go full capitalist, I'm so on board with it. They're so innovative and inventive, and like they get so inspired and passionate, and it inspires me too, even though their ideas are so silly.
Carl decides to sign up for cooking classes because he wants to see if they can be able to start up a cooking business or them having their own restaurant so they can be able to make a lot of money. And so this is actually one of my favorite moments in the entire series, when they meet up with the cooking teacher. And, the fact that she says, cooking is not just like, simple, knife work and stuff like that. It's about, living and experiencing cooking and stuff like that. And she says something about like, I had a restaurant for many, many years, and, there were some things that happened that didn't exactly worked out very well. And then I think it was Carl who said, like, let me guess, it was chapter 11? And I can't believe it. A kid like Carl would know what bankruptcy is.
Oh, of course Carl would, though, right?
He's so well-read, yeah. It's fascinating.
And then basically the teacher says one of my favorite lines. She says, "You don't know how hard it is. The competition is brutal, but the real culprit is those cursed cooking shows. They think they can make anyone learn how to boil an egg and make puff pastry just by watching somebody else do it on TV." It's like, oh man, this was like around the time in which the Food Network was like becoming really, really popular with like Emeril Lagasse and, you know, Bobby Flay and stuff like that. And even nowadays, like, I see BuzzFeed videos all the time of how to prepare fancy dishes so easily that, you know, for maybe somebody like her who had to go to culinary school and had to open up a restaurant and stuff like that, it must have been like something really hard. You know, she had to do it the old-fashioned way, when for some people it's like the equivalent of, oh, I just watched something on TV, I can be able to cook it, and I just learn it easily. Nowadays, with, like, you know, doing stuff on YouTube or even, like, food trucks or something like that, it's pretty relatable in that situation.
Yeah, and honestly, the whole gross food concept, I think, is awesome. It reminded me of Bertie Bott's Every Flavor Beans, and, like, if it actually tasted good, I would totally go to their restaurant or whatever direction they decide to take it. And, like, one great Hoodsy quote, when I think it's Lois Foutley is asking them about what they're doing, and Hoodsy says, "Yeah, we're considering expanding into other profit-seeking ventures." I'm just obsessed with them.
I think I'll agree with their full capitalist nature is them at their finest. They get truly passionate about it. And the thing is, too, is that it's something that is actually, you know, beneficial, right? Like, these kids are getting this new, exciting food. Like, it's not like they're ripping kids off. I feel like there's a lot of sort of, like, schemers or whatever. Like, they're not doing schemes. They're providing actual services.
Yeah, they're not Ed, and Eddie, you know? They're not trying to rip off their peers.
No. It's just that they happen to find, you know, products that work with their peers, which is a very valid thing to do in business. So I love them. And you know, we see throughout the episode too, like, adults eat the food too, and they're all super impressed by it. So obviously he has actual culinary abilities, apparently.
I do want to briefly touch on the I guess the main plot of this episode, though it certainly doesn't feel like it. You know, Ginger goes to the high school party. We have this great line. Macy and Dodie come with her, and we have this great line from Macy. She goes, "Observe as they bust a move to the funky remix," when they're out on, like, the dance floor. And I wish we had seen this episode before we interviewed Jackie, because I would give anything to hear her recreate that line today.
Especially the line when the girl is dancing, like, shaking her hips, and then Macy says, "That girl looks like she's about to go straight over to the emergency room."
Yeah, it's a moment. Again, this whole thing is kind of weird to me. Them, like, crashing this party, and it's a school night, and, you know, like, again, it's just this whole, like, Ginger bad girl thing is just, I don't know, it just doesn't sit with me. It just doesn't do anything for me. She's, like, obsessed with this high schooler, and I don't know how old he is.
If he's in the 10th grade and Ginger, Dodie, and Macy are in the 8th grade, we can assume that he's probably, like, 15 or 16 already?
Yeah, I feel that whole thing is just uncomfortable. I know, like, there's age gaps exist, but I feel like at that young of an age, that big of an age gap, and even just between junior high and high school, there's so much that happens. And there's so much, like, maturity differences between, like, that'd be, like, a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. Like, there's a lot larger gap than there are just in the years, and the whole thing made me feel very uncomfortable. Even though nothing really, really happens, but just the concept.
I will say I had probably my first moment of genuine connection with Miranda as a human being on, like, a personal level. When she overhears about this Ginger Jake thing, she goes, "This piece of gossip is too hot to keep cold." And I was just like, oh, I hate that Miranda gets me a little bit.
But yeah, that turns into a whole thing. And I guess, again, it's not necessarily a problem to me that Ginger is crushing on a high schooler, but, like, there's some sort of a weird, I don't know, like I said, not like an actual thing, but just, like, the way he talks to her is a little strange. I don't know. It just did not sit well with me.
Earlier in the episode, Ginger is over by the dentist. Then the dentist comes by and says, "Okay, Ginger, it's time for your checkup, but you don't have to worry about it because you have the clean mouth of the month." And then Jake starts calling her clean mouth right before he knows that her name is Ginger.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable nickname.
Yeah, it is very uncomfortable. Can we talk about the terminology of the word fast to mean, like, easy or whatever? Is that just something they used in the show to get around censors or make it less inappropriate?
Possibly, yes, considering that it was a Nicktoon, so, yeah.
Right. I've just never heard that, and neither had Ashli.
Yeah, I was like, fast. Because it's written on the bathroom wall, which, I feel bad for as a concept, though, like, assuming that it is, just an equivalent word to easy. Like, you don't want that on the bathroom wall. Like, that moment I did feel for her. I did feel a little bad, considering, she didn't actually do anything, but so it goes.
Yeah, that's actually what happens. It's like, when Jake approaches Ginger by the wall and says, "Hey, Ginger, we had fun at that party, huh?" And then at first when he started calling her clean mouth, and then it was like putting all these things together, it's like all this jumbled up information, and they thought, oh wow, so apparently Jake and Ginger kissed with one another, and there was something going on at the party, a high school party. And then Mipsy approaches Ginger again saying, "Well, Ginger, it looks like bad girls finish first." And then Ginger starts feeling even more worse than when she said nice girls finish last.
And again, I don't really know what Ginger was expecting, I don't know, like, why she was so... Again, the whole thing is just weird to me, how she's so concerned with having this good girl reputation, and now she's like, oh, but I didn't want a bad girl reputation. It's like, I don't know what her endgame is in any of this.
But does anyone at that age?
I guess it's almost like, the grass is always greener on the other side.
We have the girls excited for a school field trip to New York City, and they're talking about all the cool things that are going to be happening over there, like going to see the Statue of Liberty and going over to Ellis Island and stuff like that. And then we see Courtney and Miranda laughing at Ginger and the crew saying, "Oh, look, Miranda, how cute. To think that, New York is not just the only thing to do besides shopping and stuff like that, because all they care about is the shopping." And then we have Miranda saying, "Let's call it what they actually call it in New York, pathetic."
I couldn't get over that line. Well, Ashli, when you came to New York, all we did was shop 24/7, right? There was literally nothing else to do.
What else would there be to do, Casey Reed?
Yeah, I mean, the times that I visited New York, it's not like, I don't know, I didn't go to, like, see a off-Broadway show, went to see my family, went to a book event.
I avoid shopping here as much as I possibly can, and I live here, so I think Miranda's a little off base. And I don't think pathetic is a specific New Yorker word.
Yeah, I'm sure they would say a much more explicit word, but obviously they wouldn't have said it.
Yeah, it's just a middle finger. That's the word for that in New York. Oh, Lois has this great line right off the bat at the beginning of the episode that I want to before I forget. She goes, "If we had any more money in our savings account, we'd be broke," which is an awesome mental picture.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that, man. I feel the debt life. Yeah, I love Lois. This episode, I think, especially highlights, and we haven't had, like, a Lois strong episode in a while, and this one, she is great. She is 100% great Lois, and I love the way she deals with this, right? With this whole nurses' strike. She's so unashamed of it. Like, she recognizes, this is my life right now, and if I need to clean homes to make money, then I need to clean homes to make money, and she just owns it,
Yeah, and the inspiration for her cleaning homes was when Carlin Hoodsey was cleaning houses during Summer of Camp Caprice, except without the whole vampire gear. And so she decides that in order for her to get some money into the house, she's going to go around and clean houses. And, cleaning for Ginger is, like, really embarrassing. It's like, but Mom, you're not a cleaning maid, you're a nurse. And then she says, well, I mean, give me a job that doesn't involve with typing and all these things, and that will be fantastic, but until then, I have to clean. And then Lois says, I'm sorry, we cannot pay for the trip. I'm barely making ends meet as it is, but if you come and clean houses with me, then you'll definitely pay for the trip. And she becomes kind of hesitant, but she kind of reluctantly goes with it.
Yeah, and I think this here is way more real, right, than the last episode. The last episode, we see her being so oh, I'm embarrassed that I'm nice. And I think this is a much more real sort of build-up, right? Of her being sort of embarrassed of, one, just not having money, and two, of her mom having to clean houses for the money. And her sort of coming to terms with that just feels so much more Ginger and so much more in line with how things would go than the previous episode.
Yeah, this is definitely a very common episode to have in various slice of life cartoons, like, oh, my parent has a very embarrassing job. We see this in Doug, in which Alan Moo don't want Doug to come over because they don't want to know that their father isn't a brainy scientist, and instead he, is a baker. And we have Arthur, in which Francine is very embarrassed that in career day they get to travel around and see, oh, my dad does this for a living, and her dad happens to be a garbage man. So yeah, this is a very common thing that we see in various cartoons, and in this episode it's definitely very valid because, cleaning houses, especially for maybe some families, it means, oh, you can't do anything else, you can't do anything smart, you have to this is like a job for poor people, and I can definitely understand why that Ginger would be very embarrassed by it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I am very glad that Ginger learned the lessons she learns in this episode, and it's why this is one of my favorite episodes of the entire series so far, because the single emotional and maturity journey that Ginger goes on just in this one episode is really profound. I thought it was beautifully written.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we see Ginger and Lois cleaning the houses together and then mingling and talking, and Lois sharing stories about her college years and just bonding. That was so incredibly strong. It's such an amazing moment. And that's why I love this episode so much.
Yeah, I love, they're like, oh, I didn't know you used to live in New York. Things just start coming up between them. And I know personally I've had these kind of moments too, where something will come up between me and my mom, and I'll be like, oh, I didn't even know that happened. That's so interesting. And it's just such a genuine moment, right? We see Ginger actually growing into wanting to be friends with her mom, and I think it's just great.
Yeah, I mean, we're not getting into the levels of, Gilmore Girls, but we do definitely get to see they're definitely a lot more closer in this episode than, they have in previous episodes, which isn't to say that they didn't have a good relationship, but we see the relationship is much stronger.
Right. The side plot with the Duchess is kind of ridiculous. I do love the moment when Carl won't call the dog the Duchess. He keeps calling her Duchess. And Hoodsy says, how would you like it if someone called you Arl instead of Carl?
Yeah, the dog plot at first wasn't super interesting to me, and then they have this really adorable montage with Hoodsy bonding with the dog, and I think it's so cute, and it made everything great again. Just them trying to train her and slowly learning and all that stuff together. It's great.
Yeah.
They're so domestic and great. And I'm not gonna, gay ship the two of them. They're one of the few that I wouldn't in this show. It doesn't quite make sense, even though they're very close. But they're so, domestic and good at, they're a well-rounded pair.
Yeah, and one of the questions that I was reading a few weeks ago, there was somebody who was kind of shipping them, but they also wanted to ship Carl and Blake because Blake kind of had a antsy kind of relationship. But yeah, anyway, so I guess we can wrap up, Ginger's side plot, in which when Ginger Ginger tells Lois that, oh, you shouldn't go over to the Grippling residence because, aren't you going to be embarrassed by it? It's then, aren't you going to feel bad? And then Lois says this wonderful line about Ginger, they can't make me feel bad because I don't feel bad.
One of the best lines of the entire series, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, one of my favorite moments. And it pretty much solidified on why Lois is my favorite character in the series. Because she basically is really honest, and she is unafraid of anything. She just tackles life on. And even if things don't turn out for the best, she just keeps on going.
Yeah, and just the way that She has such a firm grasp on reality, and I think she gets to sometimes why Ginger doesn't, and she's willing to deal with it, but just, in her mind, if she needs to work and clean these houses, she's not going to feel bad, because that's what she has to do, and I just love that attitude. It's so great, and she's such a great role model for Ginger, And, Ginger ends up owning it. They go and they clean Miranda's house together, and shamelessly, and I just think it's so great.
Yeah, especially when Courtney looks down on the floor and she sees her reflection and says, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. I look better on a floor than in a mirror."
Yeah. Oh, Courtney, so vain. So vain.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, such a classic Courtney line.
The episode begins in gym class, and Courtney and Miranda are arguing about where Ginger is going to be paired up in the volleyball team. And Miranda is saying that she wants to have Ginger in the team, but then Courtney says, "But Miranda, you hate Ginger." But Miranda says, "Yes, I know I hate Ginger, but she's good at volleyball, so that's why I'm choosing her." And they have this argument towards one another, and then we see Miranda giving the biggest diss to Courtney, that she's saying that she is so sick and tired of being pushed around. So she laid it on really thick, saying that she's going to take Ginger and she's not going to take no for an answer, with Courtney feeling like she was just insulted.
Yeah, it's classic Miranda and Courtney warfare, and they always end up using Ginger as the weapon. And it's so... And Ginger kind of goes right into it every time, although this time she does manage to break. But it's like, when are you going to learn that they're just using you, and at the end of the day, Miranda and Courtney are the ones who are going to, end up being friends. Maybe I'm wrong at the very end of the show, but at least for now, any fight that they have seems to always be temporary, and they use Ginger to try to get back at each other.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen throughout the series at this point that Courtney is trying to be friends with Ginger, and she's trying really hard to try to get more closer to her, and Miranda wants nothing of it. But at the same time, she knows that Courtney is trying to be friends with Ginger. She's constantly saying about, like, get Ginger, give me a hold of Ginger, or something like that. So she was kind of like pushing her buttons, and, we've seen throughout the series at this point that Miranda has been like the side character to Courtney. And we kind of see through this episode that without Courtney and her friends, Miranda pretty much has no leadway.
Miranda, doesn't really deserve to have great friendships, right? I don't know, I almost felt bad for her at first, because, she had nowhere to sit at the table and stuff, and all that jazz, but then I remembered, she's actually a terrible person, so I don't actually feel that bad for her not having people who want to sit next to her.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen throughout the series of how much of a terrible person Miranda can be. And you feel like you should feel sorry for her, this will be a great redemption episode for Miranda. But no, this just emphasizes more on how much of a terrible person she is.
Yeah, it's a little disappointing in that regard. I also found the episode just to be almost too stressful to watch. I know it's all low-stakes drama, but how seriously they all take it was kind of stressing me out, and I was, wanting to not watch it. And I was glad. It doesn't mean I didn't like it. It was just a little difficult at times. But I did, of course, enjoy the Carl Hoodsey side plot, which I'm sure we'll have to spend some time dissecting. And maybe I'm in the minority, but it was one of my favorite Carl Hoodsey side plots of the whole show so far.
Oh, there's some golden moments with Carl and Hoodsey in this one, for sure. Them sort of succumbing to the wealthy lifestyle, I thought was fun to see.
Yeah, so their plot starts off with them trying to save up money so they can get themselves a lie detector for $400. And they're thinking about ways of trying to raise the money. So we see Hoodsey sticking his hand in the sewer to grab $1, and all of a sudden we have Mrs. Grippling and Winston driving over, and they see Hoodsey at the sewers, and they automatically stop. And Mrs. Grippling assumes that he was an urchin boy. He was basically a homeless boy in the streets, and that kind of gave Mrs. Grippling an idea to use Hoodsey as a leadway so that she can be able to have a chance to win the president of the charity committee and her country club. So she's trying to compete against this other woman who has a huge resume of helping out in soup kitchens, and she wants to be able to defeat her. And so she thinks that by disguising Hoodsey as a street urchin and having everybody in the country club feeling sorry for him, she can have her way up into becoming president. And it works. and they get a check for $400, and pretty much at that point on, you would think that immediately they would go over and buy the lie detector, and they just leave, Mrs. Grippling with her stuff, but no, they actually get themselves really comfortable with the luxurious life.
Well, and I love, as for why Hoodsey is the one who plays the street urchin and not Carl. Carl says, "I'm too robust, Hoods. No one would buy it." And I forget the wording exactly, but he basically says, like, you're like, perfect for it or something, and you're sickly, and so I thought that was funny. Robust, of all the words to describe Carl Foutley.
Yeah, I think that for the most part, just seeing Carl and Hoodsey out of their elements, I mean, they're not exactly the ones playing the prank. It's Mrs. Grippling who's convincing them to say a big lie in front of a bunch of rich people. So they're just going along for the ride, and it's actually a really nice change of pace, considering that they're the ones who are doing the scheming. They're not the ones who are involved with other people's schemes.
Right. I was devastated that we don't really... It's off-screen, right? Hoodsey's, like, actual performance.
Yeah, we never see it.
I was really looking forward to it, too.
Especially in the one scene in which when she calls Ginger in the middle of the night, and she wants her to read off from some magazine because she couldn't sleep.
Oh, yeah, it's an aquarium magazine. Like fish. Tropical Fish. Like Tropical Fish Monthly or something. I was like, of all the oddly specific things...
I would subscribe to that, no lie.
I think I did to something like that in like middle school when I was in a fish phase.
Why? Because of Finding Nemo?
No, because I just like had fish. I did again in college, but I didn't have the magazine subscription. That's why I was so taken aback. I was like, I had a Tropical Fish magazine. What? But I don't know if I'd want it read to me at midnight.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how would that be? The tropical fish lives in the current as it swoops by in... What? I don't even know.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of relaxing, and it's like pre-YouTube, so it's not like she could just look up a video to like watch fish, so she needs someone to read it. I don't know.
The world may never know.
It's great to see them become, like, spa zombies, too, and when it bleeds over into school. And there's this great moment where they're about to take a pop quiz on the Louisiana Purchase, and Hoodsey just says, "Oh, I don't think I could even say Louisiana Purchase." And Carl goes, "You just did, but I get your point."
Yeah, I also loved they had, like, instead of having cucumbers over their eyes, they had erasers placed over their eyes. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Trying to recreate their spa experience their whole lives.
So the episode begins with Ginger being elected into the school council, and she creates a brand new brother-sister program when she sees that the same kids have been attending detention every single week. She wants to be able to have a brother-sister program so that if a kid gets into trouble, they can be paired up with a big brother or sister, and they can become good role models for them. And she feels that this will be a great idea. And yeah, I mean, the concept is it is a pretty decent idea. I mean, we do have like big brother, big sister programs, especially for those who are only children. But yeah, we'll later see on in this episode about how people just kind of take advantage of it. But and so we have Ginger really excited about about being in the student council and trying to see if she can be able to pitch this idea for all the students. And we even see Principal Milty just not wanting to become principal anymore, and he wants to spend more time at the golf course.
Yeah, I did think, there was some insight here for a brief moment where Ginger is talking about, she's like, clearly the penalty system here isn't working. We see the same kids ending up in detention every week. And I thought that was like kind of an analogy to prison sentences, right? Like we see that in real life. Maybe I'm overthinking this, but like it's been shown that like if you go to jail, you're like pretty likely to be there again, and how like people argue that that's the reason that the prison system doesn't work. Like I said, I might be reading too much into this, but I felt parallels there.
Yeah, and I just finished up the new season of Orange is the New Black and then watched this episode, and I was like, wow, there is a lot of overlap here that I never expected.
I mean, after Ginger's, crime in the beginning. You never know what the show's going to bring up.
Carl and Hoodsie are over at the aquarium for a school trip, and they see a baby whale. The baby whale was rescued because there was no food for the whale to eat. And so Carl starts feeling really sorry for the whale. And then Hoodsie comes up and says, wow, they were able to save that whale, but what about all the other whales in the ocean? So he comes up with an idea that he was working on this experiment where he combined kelp with cauliflower, and he wants to flush it in all the toilets in the school so that the baby whales can be able to eat it. This turns out to be a disaster because it turns out that their elementary school does not run the sewers all the way up to the ocean. They have a septic tank, and the septic tank bursts overnight, and the entire playground is completely covered in like this gross, icky muck from the kelp/cauliflower, and Carl is completely punished. And that was when, we have the leadway into him joining the Big Brother/Big Sister program over at the Lucky Junior High School.
Yeah, I remember thinking right at the top of this episode when Ginger gets elected to student council, like, oh, there's so much possibility here. She's such a natural leader. I'll bet this will be really interesting. And I was kind of let down with the direction that the episode took, because I thought, and I hope they, I guess you can confirm or deny this, right? Actually, probably better not, but I'm hoping that there are future Ginger student council-y references later on in the show, although sometimes the show just sort of gives up on certain things, so because it's usually good with continuity, but I could see them just abandoning this.
This whole system is just, there's a lot of problems with it too, right? I also thought it was kind of weird that, like, it seems like the Big Brother system means that he's, like, there, like, all the time, right? Like, this isn't just, like, a couple hours a week sort of a thing.
Yeah, he's, like, in his house.
Yeah, like, it's a little over the top, right? Like, his mom is, like, serving him dinner and stuff, like, alright, which, again, these kinds of programs exist to an extent, but, like, every day, he's just, like, always with him. Like, does this guy just not have a life now? Is he just like, you know what? I'm willing to dedicate my life to potentially make this one kid who would have had a detention turn into a better kid. I don't know.
Yeah, he wants to send him over to military school. He wants him to get rid of his doghouse by removing it by piece by piece.
Yeah, like you can't do that, right? Like, this is a school program, and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm telling you that you have to destroy your own property. Like, come on.
Seriously, I get it. You're a military kid, and you believe in order, you believe in discipline. I get it. But seriously, invading this kid's life, telling him what to do, forcing him to do things that he doesn't want to, the whole purpose of a Big Brother, Big Sister program is giving them advice and hoping that they would listen to it so they can become better people. Not forcing them against their will and making their lives even more miserable, so most likely they'll get even into more trouble.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't really understand what the goal of this guy, what's his name, George? I don't really get what the goal was for him writing-wise.
Yeah, I mean, we've already pretty much said, like, this episode does a lot of things that are just kind of like, what? And I was kind of excited at the beginning, too. I liked the idea of Ginger and Carl's plots kind of intersecting in this way, and I was like, oh, this should be interesting, but it just is kind of an ongoing mess.
The plot on both of these are awful. I'm sorry. In most of the episodes that we've covered so far, we're either leaning over towards the Ginger plot or the Carl and Hoodsie plot. But in this episode, I don't like either of them because both of them are awful. And they're both awful because of stupid reasons. We have Ginger seeing that, the Big Brother, Big Sister program isn't working very well because she hears from Dodie and Macy that a lot of kids are getting in trouble on purpose so they can be paired up with a big brother and sister so they can be able to get free car rides. They can be able to go see rated R movies. They can be able to have, this one person do their homework and stuff like that.
Okay, just quick tangent on that. So if you're the type of high schooler who apparently is willing to dedicate, like, hours and hours of your life into, like, this program, I feel like you're, like, not the kind of person that's looking to just, like, I don't know, break rules and stuff with them. I don't know. This whole program is just strange to me, right? They're just apparently allowed to be unattended with these kids, and they're just like, do whatever with them. Like, I just feel like if you were to do this program, you should have it where, like, I don't know, there's, like, set meetings within the school or something, right? I don't know. Like, how many high schoolers just willingly want to drag around middle school kids all the time. I know that would not have been high on my list of things to do.
Absolutely not, but it does speak to how quickly middle schoolers will put any high schooler on a pedestal.
Oh, that is definitely true. That's valid.
It just gives you, the same way that high schoolers do, like, oh, I went to a college party, and everyone's like, what?
Yeah. And then you graduate college, and now what do we do?
I don't know, you go over to those lodge clubs. I don't know.
I've had a couple nice wine and cheese nights with, like, one or two friends in my living room. You know, things slow down. Life comes at you fast, and then it stops.
You'll wake up at 7 a.m. to watch the golf tournaments. Right. You go to a knitting class.
Right. I'm already there.
Oh, man, guys. The day that happens, please just get me out of wherever I am. Stop me from doing whatever I'm doing.
Anyway, so there's this one scene that pretty much perfectly cements to me that this plan of the Big Brother, Big Sister program is a bust. So we have the scene in the bathroom in which when Ginger finds out from a student that she aired out Principal Milty's car tires, and she wants to be paired up with a girl who is the most popular girl in high school so that she can be able to get credibility. And then she even tells Ginger, you know, I never got into trouble all my life, and now that I did, I have to thank you for that, and it feels great. So it's like, wow. If you were responsible for causing a person to get in trouble on purpose and they never did it before, I'm sorry, you suck.
Carl, you know, realizes that if he fails, Ginger's program will fail. So he has to, for that moment, even though it's over, he doesn't know that yet. And he's ready to sort of change his life, at least for the short term, to help Ginger out. You can just tell that they have each other's backs, and I think it's great.
Yeah, that's probably the sole redeeming factor of this, honestly, right? Like, is the idea that, well, we do get to see that they care for each other. Do I think that it could have been done about 10,000 better ways? Yeah, but at least there is something there.
Yeah, and at first, when George finds out that the Big Brother, Big Sister program was over, at first he goes over to Carl and says, "Just because it's over doesn't mean I'm gonna stop meeting up with you. I'm gonna still be there whenever that you're around." It's like, seriously, dude, the program is over. Piss off. And then we have George coming by and saying, you know, wherever that you are, you will definitely remember me. And then he just walks away. And then, pretty much, I'll just let you guys know in advance, he never comes back. Thank God!
I like that the episode kind of dives right into it, that Dodie, not Hoodsy, gets off the phone. She goes, guys, I have to go. My Nana just died. And just right there, that's the episode. You know, a few minutes in, totally, you know, they don't try to beat around the bush, they don't come up with any euphemism, it's just, my Nana just died, and then it's, okay, now we have to deal with this and figure out how to support our friend. It's a really impressive feat that they pulled off this episode.
Yeah, it's another one of those episodes that, as told by Ginger, does that other shows just won't touch these same, or at least not other cartoons, will touch these same deep topics in such a real, straightforward way. And I think, specifically looking at, and we'll get into it more, but looking into sort of Hoodsy's reaction to it, and sort of this idea of, you know, when somebody dies that you're not particularly close to, and sort of that confusing set of emotions that a lot of people, I think, go through. And sort of not knowing, you know, like, I'm supposed to be sad, but I'm not, and again, just those sorts of things are not talked about on other shows, and I think they do it just so well in this episode.
Yeah, I definitely do agree. And once again, it's another episode where both of the plots are interwoven into one, which is fantastic because, as we've mentioned before, those are some of our favorite episodes were about when when the Carl and Hoodsy plot and the Ginger plot kind of wove together into one. It goes from the scheme to immediately going over to Hoodsy's perspective, in which he's the one who's going to have to give the speech in the funeral. And Hoodsy doesn't know what to do because he never really had a close relationship with his grandmother compared to Dodie. He's not very sad about it, and he kind of feels out of place compared to everybody else who's devastated. We see Dodie get devastated, and we see their father crying his eyes out, being absolutely devastated because that was his mom. And he's out there choosing the dress for her. And he's just, every time that we see him, he's really emotional. He's crying. So, yeah, it's a good episode, to showcase more of Hoodsy's dad, because the only time in which we do see him, he's kind of like either in the background or he's just sitting around watching TV.
Yeah, it's certainly the biggest outburst we get of that character, and I felt bad laughing, but it's so ridiculous that it's almost funny.
Yeah, and also speaking of laughing and death, even Macy kind of has these uncomfortable chuckling moments whenever they're discussing about Nana Bishop's passing, and she's kind of really embarrassed by it because she feels incredibly nervous. Even when they were discussing about how they have to go over to the funeral, Macy's never seen a dead body before, and she's really scared of going, but being the amazing character that she is, she's willing to go over there at the cost of being incredibly frightful. She says, I'm going to be over there. That's what makes a BFF.
Yeah, showcasing, again, just their incredible friendship, and even at this young age, how much they're able to stand by each other in these sort of difficult times. And I think Macy specifically is always very good with that. She's truly just always thinking of other people more than herself. And God, I love Macy. I know I say that anytime she ever comes up, but she's fantastic.
All right, so while walking to the park, Ginger learns a little bit more about her grandmother. He starts telling her stories about how when she was a baby, she had trouble getting to sleep, and that her grandmother would drive around for hours and hours until she fell asleep. And we even have Jonas impersonating as Lois, which is actually pretty hilarious. If you think that you're going to have to drive a car every time that she wants to take a nap, you're out of your mind.
Yeah, his impression's pretty good. I thought it was hilarious. Like, in that sort of way where it's not like a great impression, but you can tell that they lived together for years.
Yeah, they've known each other for a long time, so we definitely do get to see that even Jonas knows about Lois's quirks. So between an Even Steven holiday special and this particular episode, it's nice to see Ginger and Jonas coming together. And don't worry, there'll be plenty of opportunities in which we do, and especially one that is absolutely amazing. But we will not get into that until much later. But here, it's actually really nice, in which he starts telling stories about his mom, and he even says that that his mom even made up for the fact that his dad was a disappointment, must run in the family, which, yeah, I guess, some things repeat in, over and over with, him ending up being a disappointment for Ginger and Carl.
Yeah, Carl always has some mean stuff to say to him, but Ginger is pretty good at sort of staying kind. It's almost, he's harder on himself than Ginger is on him, really, and it's hard to have a ton of sympathy for him, but he also is kind of a pathetic character.
Yeah, he kind of is. And then, I guess, there's this one thing that I really need to discuss about. I mean, sure, for maybe some people, they would think of this particular scene as absolutely nothing, but it's actually a really subtle hint of continuity. So here's what it is. So we have the scene in which when Lois is walking around putting glue traps all over the attic because she thinks there's rats up there. So we have her finding Jonas's home movies, and then when she digs around, she sees that there are squirrels all over the attic. For those who are wondering what I'm talking about, I want you to watch Never Can Say Goodbye, and I want you to look into one particular scene in which there's a squirrel that's climbing up in the roof into a hole. And that happens at least twice throughout the series, leading up into losing Nana Bishop. So yeah, throughout this entire time, there have been squirrels in and out, going on top of the roof, inside to the attic, which is where all the squirrels came from.
Yeah, that's some next level stuff. Wow. That is detail.
Yeah, I definitely would not have noticed that.
Yeah, I'm sure for a lot of people, they didn't catch it the first time, especially myself. But yeah, when rewatching the show again, you kind of do, get little bits of continuity in that. Like, just right now, I didn't even notice about Jonas's hairs. Okay, so continuing on. So now we cut into, Hoodsy's side of the story, in which he's giving off the speech about his Nana. And he talks about how it kind of is a bit of a downer at first, about how he's kind of negative to her, saying, like, Nana never let me do this and this and that. Nana always was kind of scolding me instead of Dodie. Nana took me to the Nutcracker, and I thought it was pretty boring, but the the fight with the Rat King was pretty cool. And then he slowly kind of warms up to his Nana Bishop, talking about how he's gonna miss her, and he's gonna miss the way that she pinches his cheeks and the blue foam and rum raisin, and that she's now in the big bingo hall in the sky. So it's actually pretty cute, and it's actually pretty touching that he was able to kind of warm up to the fact that he's going to miss his grandmother, even though he wasn't that close to her.
Yeah, and this speech is such a great moment. It's so well done. It's so true to Hoodsy, but still true to the moment, I think. I just love the way that they handled this. I think it's, like I said, very true to character, but very much you can feel the sort of way that he's sort of working through it himself while he's giving this speech. How at the beginning he's like, I didn't really get along with her, and like you said, how he slowly warms up through it. I think it's incredibly written, incredibly acted, and one of the better moments, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's morbid, too, besides just the obvious death reference, but the coffin kind of sliding back and forth. It's a pretty unforgettable moment of the show. I didn't remember every detail from this episode, having only watched it twice, but that moment I will never forget of this show. One of the 3 or 4 big moments.
Yeah, and even one of the more funnier moments is when, Nana Bishop's coffin is being lowered down. We have Mr. Bishop saying, "Oh, mother," and he falls down 6 feet under. And then Hoodsy's like, "I want to go down there too." And Joanne grabs him and says, "You will do no such thing, Robert Joseph."
Yeah, she goes, "David Charles Bishop, get out of that grave this instant."
That's so her.
Which, it shouldn't be as funny as it is, and, I don't even think he falls. I think he's throwing himself onto the casket, which is really heartbreaking, but he's just so ridiculous and such a, schlubby guy that he's so similar looking to Hoodsy. You just can't help but grin a little bit.
Yeah, and then the episode ends with Ginger watching the home movies, and she kind of thinks about Hoodsy's eulogy, and she says one of my favorite lines in the entire series about how Hoodsy's eulogy touched her, and that sometimes we can get mad or feel bad whenever our family members say some mean things, but then one day they're gone and all you have are the memories. And so you should really appreciate whatever family member that you have right before they're gone. I even mentioned this in my top 15 as told by Ginger's episodes list, but I guess for those who don't know, I could say it right here. So I had a cousin who lived outside the country, and she and we never actually had a close relationship with one another. Whenever she would come by to visit, I would just say, "Hey, how's it going?" And then she would say hi, and we would just be on our way. We were pretty much the opposite, so we never really spoke to one another. She actually got along more with my sister and my other cousins than me. But then a few years ago, she died in a tragic bus accident while she was on her way home from college. And my family was beyond devastated, and I felt sad too. And I was it shocked me because she was I don't know, she must have been 25 when she died. So yeah, it was just really shaken to me about how a family member that I didn't really, really connect with just was gone in just a flash, and I didn't know how to feel about it.
Wow, yeah, so that's a really pretty direct connection to how Hoodsy was feeling.
Yeah, something like that.
My first hot take on this episode is that I love that we have an episode of Ginger being just a moody teenager. She's always has such a good relationship with most people in her life that for her to have a moment and go, "I hate my family, I can't spend another second with them," is spot on and absolutely necessary at this point in the show. And I thought it was great how they built up to it and great how they resolved it.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. I mean, at one point in our lives, we always feel like our family is either embarrassing us or we feel out of place with our family, that we don't act like them or they don't act like us. I'm sure that at some point in our lives, we feel like we wish that we can go over to another family. Maybe our friend's family or maybe somebody that we know and wish, man, I wish I could be with them as opposed to my family. My family's just weird or they're boring or something. So having something like that does make a lot of sense for Ginger. Absolutely. I mean, she has Carl, who's an absolute weirdo, and we have Lois, whom, we did mention in the nurses' strike, in which she's really determined to do what she can to raise her family, but she's unafraid of everything, and she doesn't care what people think about her. That could also go into another direction that may lead to some people being a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't blame her either, especially within these years of your life, right? These are the years where it's kind of embarrassing to have people who are so different and weird, and especially from the outside when she looks at the Griplings and is like, oh, they seem so put together, they seem so, such and such. So it makes sense for her to sort of go through the same issues that I think a lot of people go through.
Yeah, I do love this episode is I think the best example so far of Ginger's, the grass is much greener on the other side sort of motif from the opening. And especially exemplified in the line, it's like the Griplings have this perfect family. And I actually burst out laughing when she said that because they're so dysfunctional and so cold to each other. But of course they appear like this image of perfection.
Yeah, but to be quite honest, she doesn't really... the only person that she knows from the Griplings is Courtney. We don't see her hang out with Blake, and we never see her and Mrs. Gripling come together.
Oh, for sure. It makes sense why Courtney would think that. Or why Ginger would think that. The only real experience she's had with them is in the sleepover episode in terms of their house and their family. And I guess she... Is Winston the butler's name? He hangs out at her place for a little bit, but other than that, not a ton of interaction with the rest of the Griplings.
Exactly. So I guess, with, the very few times that Ginger has been in Courtney's house and the fact that, in that one scene in which she saw the Griplings acting really nice and politely, I wouldn't blame her for thinking that the Griplings were absolutely perfect. So yeah, we cut into the scene in which the whole entire house is covered in a tent and they only have about 10 minutes to grab their favorite belonging. And so Ginger walks over to get her journal. And it's kind of an interesting perspective. We kind of see like a first-person view of the guys coming over and checking the mold. And the mold is spreading throughout the entire house and everything's falling apart. And then she finds her journal and she grabs it. And then we have Carl who sees the bathroom door filled with mold and he wants to grab a sample. And Lois says, absolutely not. You're going nowhere near the mold. And Carl is really, really disappointed because he wanted to get a sample. He even told Hoodsie to make it over to the library and find out how to get a sample. And Hoodsie's yelling at the library, saying, use the cab, Carl! Use the cab! And the librarian shushes him, so... Yeah, it's tough luck for Carl. So, yeah, as soon as that's done, their belongings are taken over to the truck so that they can be able to scan to see if there's any mold in it. And the entire news press is surrounding the Foutleys, with Ginger not knowing what to say. She kind of walks away from it immediately, and Lois and Carl just basically spill out the beans on what's going on. Lois saying about how the house looked pretty similar with the exception of the dirty dishes and Carl's dirty laundry on the floor, and Carl wanting to get a sample and that he's a huge mold aficionado. And Ginger is like really angry that Lois and Carl are able to talk about what's going on in their household like if it's nothing. And she just feels really embarrassed by it. If this stuff were able to upload like on Facebook or on YouTube, I'm sure that probably Ginger would have felt a lot worse because then everybody would be talking about it.
Right. I'm always conflicted in episodes like this where it's like the community being judgmental. And, like, even Mrs. Bishop acting like Lois has the plague or whatever. But it is very real. I just sort of like to think that it isn't. It's depressing how communities can sort of turn against each other or unite together against one family in really upsetting ways.
Yeah, and unfortunately that's becoming more of a thing nowadays.
Yeah.
So Ginger basically tells Lois that she's not going to be with the Bishop family and their rumpus room. She's going to stay over at Courtney's place because she feels that that's a more appropriate family to be around with. And Lois is kind of really upset about it because she thought that maybe Ginger would be with her, and especially in a situation like this where they could have a chance of losing their home. But no, Ginger wants absolutely nothing to do with her family, at least at this point in time.
I think it's a little unfair, But I don't think Ginger has to be fair all the time, you know. There's really no real reason for her to snap on her family, but it happens. We've all been there, and like I said at the beginning, I think it's a great development for Ginger's character, that even though she has this great relationship with her brother and her mom, that sometimes she's just had enough.
Yeah, I definitely think it's valid for her to get tired, and especially, like I said, at this age when you're kind of figuring yourself out, it's just one more annoying thing, and as much as I love Lois, I could see sort of her, she almost cares too little what people think about her sometimes compared to how you feel like you should be at the age that Ginger's at, right? If that makes some sense. Like, it's hard to understand Lois and all of her age and how she can sort of just not care about these sorts of things when Ginger's at a place when caring about what other people think is so prominent.
We have Ginger all by herself, and then we have them having dinner together. And, you know, she has to be dressed appropriately for dinner in this gigantic table with only 3 people. And this is the scene in which Winston announces that Mr. Grippling is going to be coming by for dinner. And you may think, oh man, we get to see what Mr. Grippling looks like for the first time, but it turns out to be a telephone. And Mr. Grippling is on the other line speaking to his family.
Yeah, I would love more info on him if the series reveals it, which I hope they will.
Oh, don't worry. There will be a big reveal about Mr. Grippling, and hoo boy, it's gonna be a massive revelation. Stay tuned for that.
Oh man, you got me excited now, Patricia.
Yeah, but don't worry. But for that particular episode, there's going to be a lot of surprises ahead, especially for all you listeners. So stay tuned. She watches the news with Lois and Carl discussing about the house and the mold from earlier, and she said that, you know, I wanted to get away and find the perfect family, but I realized that I left them behind.
Yeah, it's a really nice moment, and the reunion is very earned. It's a short. These aren't long episodes, but it really takes you on an arc in just the 20-some minutes. They pack a lot in there, and an entire emotional journey in this episode. And with us, we have Eryk Molinsky, who was a storyboard artist, one of 3 on this episode. So that's super exciting. Welcome, Eryk.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say, generally speaking, I had very high hopes for this one. When I saw the Emmy nomination, I shouldn't have looked at that before I watched the episode, but it absolutely lived up to that. So I was really happy to see. This was already definitely a favorite of mine. I, as the listeners know, have not watched the show all the way through. Patricia has, so I'm sort of having it revealed to me episode by episode, and I thought this was a really significant sort of mid-season check-in on all of the various characters we've been dealing with for the last 29 episodes now.
I remember I wasn't in the recording session, but I remember hearing that the actress who played Dodie's mother was a little concerned that her character was so one note, and she was wondering if she could add more nuance to it. And I remember hearing, this is just people were telling me how the discussions went, and they just said, you know, this is very much about a kid's point of view. You know, when you're a kid, sometimes you have some teacher or some parent that you just think are mean, you know, and maybe years later as an adult you realize, oh, they were going through personal issues or whatever. But your child's perspective is you're scared of this teacher, you're scared of this parent, and they really wanted to kind of capture that point of view. But then at the end, I added, just skip ahead, I added that little bit where she gives Hoodsy a hug. I felt like, because I remember hearing that story, and I thought, well, at least I could humanize her a little bit in the way we animate.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great compromise, because there are parents just like Joanne Bishop. She's a little caricature-y, but I think we all knew somebody like her growing up. But it was also nice to remind us that, you know, she is still a complicated human being, just like all of the other characters on the show.
Yeah, and deep down there's concern. She's, you know, worried about her son who's alone in the woods.
Right, and yeah, not without reason. And she's a little hesitant to be thrilled about Carl Foutley, which is, again, not without reason.
Yeah, so throughout the series, at this point in time, Joanne and Carl haven't exactly gotten along. You know, because if you remember from Sleep On It, Carl was the one responsible for scaring away Joanne's book club when he released the rotten eggs. Then we had, in Losing Nana Bishop, where, you know, they bought the shackles and the iron mask, and Hoodsy ended up wearing the iron mask to their grandmother's funeral. And, of course, with Deja Vu, when Hoodsie got amnesia, Joanne wanted Hoodsie to stay far away from Carl as possible, wanted him for being friends with Brandon. So, yeah, we see that when Hoodsie begs his mom for him to come over to the vacation at Loon Lake, she absolutely refuses. She says, absolutely not. Carl is a bad influence on you. And then we have, Hoodsie's father coming along and says, oh, let the boy come, Joanne. What's one more mouth to feed gonna hurt? And then, she says, I'll tell you what, that one boy is Carl Foutley. And yeah, I mean, I get it that Carl is a bit of a troublemaker at times, but yeah, I mean, in this episode, this is like her most over-the-top acting, with her being really hateful for Carl, and then of course we'll talk a little bit more later about the trip. But yeah, so eventually she gets convinced to let Carl come to the trip, and then she has that look of she immediately regrets it. And so now Carl is going to be coming along for the trip so that they can be able to scare off Blake. And then we have the girls who are not excited to be going to this trip because they know about how eccentric and how extreme that Joanne can be. And Lois gives off great advice as usual, saying that, be there for your friend Dodie.
Yeah, I've always loved Lois's Boston accent too. I mean, being from Boston originally, and working in LA. I know the show was supposed to take place in Connecticut, and they would try to make it New England centric. And I remember this was a decision the actress made on her own. She came up with the backstory for Lois. She's like, well, I've decided she's like a working class, from working class Boston. And, they're like, class is something we talked about a lot behind the scenes too, in terms of the idea that Ginger comes from a working class family. And then of course it plays out on the show in terms of the story, but we would think about it too in terms of design. Macy's parents being a bit more professional, Dodie being more middle class, and so yeah, it's interesting the way and of course Courtney being on the top of the echelon there, but it's something we thought about, and we put it into the drawings, and we put it into everything a lot. By the way, that family that walks by when they're at the clam shack or the clam place, that like albino looking family, that was actually a mistake.
Do tell.
They were supposed to be, I think in the script it said it was this perfect blonde family. Like, it's that feeling like when you're on a trip and you see this family that looks absolutely perfect and you're like, oh, my family's a disaster. Why don't I have a family like that one? But, the way it would work then is we would draw the storyboards, and then you would do the colors and everything, and you ship it to Korea, and it would come back like 3 or 4 months later, and it was always like a crapshoot whether they got anything wrong. I mean, I did a Rugrats once where I made I was drawing a worm too big that Phil and Lil were fighting over, and it came back from Korea and was the size of a snake, and the whole crew laughed at me. But anyway, they came back and they looked like an albino family, and they were walking in this very strange way, and everyone just started laughing. And I remember the executive producer was like, keep it and I'm like, that's so weird and freaky, like, don't, because we would send a lot of things back to be fixed, so that's not what we intended. But at that point they're just like, that's so funny, we have to keep it as it is.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that does beg the question for me. How much of a feedback loop was there between writing and animation? Like, would you guys just send things back and forth until you agreed, or how did that work?
No, the scripts were completely done. In fact, when we would get the script, we would also get, I'm really dating myself, we'd get a cassette tape of the actors. And you would you read, you knew what your section was, and you'd be coordinated with the other 2 storyboard artists, and you'd be working all under the same director. It was always, because there are 2 commercial breaks, it was always 3 board artists. Each of you takes one of the sections between the commercial breaks. And so I was very excited that they cast me basically to do that, the 3rd section. But and then you listen to that cassette tape over and over again. And when I was just listening to the episode earlier, I was just thinking, like, even though we probably made that episode in 2001, because it took a long time to put together, so there's no question that I was probably working on that episode a year before it came out. I mean, given how long ago that was, every line of dialogue to me, it's like buried deep into my brain.
Right.
Even the parts that weren't, the section I storyboarded. I mean, I knew every intonation. It's just weird. Like, it's almost like when you hear some song you used to love, and right before the lyric comes on, something in your head is like, I know exactly what the singer's about to say. So That's how it would work. And then you would pitch it. You would do sketches, like little thumbnail sketches, and you would then, you'd be with the executive producer and the director, and you'd kind of pitch your section to them, and you'd be like, okay, so this is it. We're gonna have like a shot from like behind the tree, and then the camera's gonna zoom in, and then you sort of like you kind of excitedly pitch out your sequence from just a kind of cinematic point of view, and then they give you a lot of notes.
Cool.
Yeah, and then you spend the next like 4 weeks just executing it because, I mean, now they have these animation discs that are digitized, so you can kind of like take a Wacom tablet. You would pick up like from the character sheet, the character, plop it in there, twist, change it how you want. But we had to draw everything from scratch, and I can even sometimes recognize different storyboard artists when I see the finished cartoon because I remember we all drew them a little differently. Yeah, let me ask you guys a question, because I remember the time, too, they did some audience research with the kids who were really into the show, and they found that, in the same way that Carl and Ginger are living in these, like, parallel worlds, the kids were, too, and a lot of the girls just didn't even understand why Carl and Hoodsie were on the show. Like, they felt like this would be such a better show if there was no Carl and Hoodsie, and some of the guys were like, some of the boys were like, I like Carl and Hoodsie, but why are they stuck in this girl show? And it was kind of a weird, I think that the network was in a little bit of a strange pickle in that sense, because they knew how to market so clearly the what the other shows were about. But that's the thing that we loved about the show, was that especially when you have a boy who, is Carl supposed to be like 10 or something?
Yeah,
11,
in this season, Carl is 10 years old.
Yeah, and she's like 13. I mean, that's like when you have a brother and sister at that such different ages of childhood development. What is important to you is so radically different, especially a boy and a girl, and that's what we loved. But I don't know, what did you, as kids, I assume you're kids when you watched this, what was your reaction to those two different worlds?
I was 14 when I saw the show, and I can tell you that I liked both of them because I actually did an analysis video discussing about As Told by Ginger called Why As Told by Ginger was a groundbreaking yet overlooked Nicktoon, and I discussed about that the reason why the show was so great in my opinion was because it focused on two different perspectives. In a lot of slice of life cartoons, they always focus on one main character and their friends. And, with the exception of maybe Hey Arnold, in which it would focus on other characters, but that was more like the exception than the rule. A lot of the shows, you have Doug, you have Lloyd in Space, you have maybe occasionally, like, all these other shows. I mean, sure, you have, like, a group of friends, but then maybe some kids will be more focused than others. But with As Told by Ginger, you have the two different perspectives. If you don't like one of them, you can always go to the other one, which I think is a great balance. It's like you said, the boys like the Carl and Hoodsie plot, the girls like the Ginger plot. So, we even interviewed Melissa, just a few minutes ago, and we were talking about how, that it was the kind of show that a bunch of people can gather up together. We had this one guy who said that I liked watching the show with my mom and my grandmother. We can be able to watch the show together. So, yeah, it does actually bring in multiple people to come in together, as opposed to, like, a show that was like a Nicktoon at the time in which... it only focuses on one general audience. In fact, I even made that statement in my video. It's like, ever since Klasky Csupo created Rugrats, all the other shows that they created focus on one specific audience. Like, if you liked Our Real Monsters, that means that most likely you were a boy who liked gross-out humor. If you liked Rocket Power, most likely you were a kid who liked skateboarding or snowboarding or surfing. If you liked The Wild Thornberrys, most likely you were a person who liked animals and nature shows. So yeah, basically with As Told by Ginger, I feel that both boys and girls can be able to watch it, and if they don't like one thing, then they can always just stick to the other.
Yeah, theoretically, I mean, that should. I that's exactly how I how I felt, how we all felt. It was a little frustrating for us though, because we felt like this was such a great show we were putting together. It was never quite given the same kind of attention and appreciation that we thought it kind of deserved, because I think there was a sense of a lot of people didn't know what to do with it, unfortunately, or exactly they didn't. Not everybody unfortunately had that holistic approach to appreciating the show.
And it saddens me, because I think where that market research comes from is parents teaching kids gender norms to an extent that isn't helpful. To me, As Told by Ginger probably appeals more to young girls. I liked it growing up, and I had friends who liked it growing up. I think that Nickelodeon often played it safe by always going with male protagonists for the vast majority of their shows. Ginger was a straying from that, and it was a risk, as was, Wild Thornberries, and I'm sure there are others.
As of right now, there are only 4 or 5 Nicktoons that have female protagonists. There's Eliza Thornberry, Ginger Foutley, Jenny from My Life as a Teenage Robot.
Right, who's a robot, yeah.
Yeah, Bessie Higginbottom from The Mighty Bee, and Cora from The Legend of Korra. That's it.
Right.
Out of over 30 plus Nicktoons, only 5 of them have female protagonists.
I never felt growing up like Carl and Hoodsie were out of place, to answer your initial question. It just felt like another part of the world. And, I only had brothers as siblings, but you don't have the same set of experiences as your siblings because you're at different ages at the same time. I liked that Carl and Ginger are having radically different experiences while living in the same house and having a pretty impressive communicative relationship, and I think that's thanks to Lois, that they're a great family, and that kind of brings the show together.
Yeah, and I just love the idea of what is important to you at the age of 10 versus what is important to you at the age of 13, and there's always that moment when they look at each other and it's like, how can you think that's important? The other one would be like, how can you think that's important? And yet they realize that they need each other to solve their whatever problem it is. That's where I felt like the show is always at its best.
Totally, and especially in an episode like this where they all are kind of stuck together on this trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing to answer your question, Eryk, about, why the show didn't really catch on. Again, I mentioned in that video that As Told by Ginger was mostly dramatic. And at the same time, around the time that the show was out, we had SpongeBob, we had the Fairly Odd Parents, we had Chalk Zone and Danny Phantom, and all these things. They were all comedic. All of these shows that were out before As Told by Ginger and during the time have always been about making people laugh and, focusing on gags and adult jokes. And I even knew some people, I was in high school when I saw the show, and everybody that I knew in high school was getting into Invader Zim because it felt like it was a show that they can connect to because it was for a more older audience. So, at the time that I knew about some people, they said that, the reason why I don't like it is because why would I watch a show that of something that I'm going through right now? It's like, I'm going to school, they're going to school, why would I want to watch this?
Yeah, actually, I could see that. I think at their age, I probably felt the same way, sadly enough.
Yeah. And, and of course with our listeners from the forums, now a lot of them are appreciating As Told by Ginger. They tell us a whole bunch of, comments about the episodes and their favorite characters and their favorite moments. So it's like, it's like with ever since the airings of all of the episodes on Nicksplat and, even to some extent, when I did As Told by Ginger month almost 2 years ago, and even this podcast, is that As Told by Ginger is starting to, bring the audience that was loving the show the first time and maybe even getting some new ones.
That's great. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I remember we would have discussions back then about, we were all obsessed with our own things in our own childhood. And we were talking about, these kids are going to grow up and they're going to actually probably appreciate this more. And I'm going to be really curious. I remember saying, back in 2001 and 2, I wonder when these kids grow up, what they're going to create around these shows. Because we were at the time, of course, creating so much culture and things around the things that we grew up with. So it's kind of funny to, see that happen.
Yeah, and the more serious shows are, I think, more recognized. Not that Hey Arnold wasn't successful in its own right, but the shows, my co-host Ashli and I do a podcast about Nicktoons from our era growing up in general, and Hey Arnold and As Told by Ginger are two of the ones that our listeners seem to respond to the most now.
Yeah, and we were in a totally different building. We were on Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood, which was kind of cool. And then Nickelodeon was in Burbank, and we had nothing to do with them. I mean, it was practically, we knew that we were all on the same network, but it was like two totally different studios, which is kind of
wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, so I guess that with that, with you separating from Nickelodeon, that means that probably you had a little bit more creative freedom than probably all the other Nicktoons at that point.
Yes. No, actually, I'm remembering now that you would particularly care, but I'm like, no, it was Sunset Boulevard. I remember, it was Sunset Boulevard, actually, I'm remembering. We did. I mean, there was a lot of pride at the time that Klasky Chupo was an independent studio. that happened to have this relationship with Nickelodeon. But there was a strong, fierce sense of independence. And the fact that we were in LA, I think that there was a sense that we were a little bit more grounded towards the city, towards kind of the, grittiness or edginess of everyday life. That area has become much more fancy now than it was back then. Back then it was still kind of coming back from the bad old days. And Burbank was, it felt very much like this gigantic outdoor mall. And so, I think we were kind of proud that we were just a teeny bit more anchored in the grittiness of the city.
All right. That sounds really interesting, Eryk.
Nice.
All right, I guess that should be the end of this episode. So yeah, once again, when you were talking earlier about that the episode was nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Program in less than half an hour, I found out what episode won the Emmy, and that was the Futurama episode Roswell That Ends Well.
It's so good.
Yeah, which one was that?
That was the episode in which Fry goes back in time to 1947, and he meets up with his grandma, and he accidentally kills his grandfather, and it just ends up being incredibly convoluted with him ending up being his own grandfather.
Right. I think that's what they're going to die. They announced to Zoidberg they're going to dissect him, and they describe how horribly they're going to do it. He's like, "Oh boy!"
Yeah. Well, it's a great moment of continuity for the show. They go for one of his hearts, and he goes, "Take, I have 4," and then like 2 seasons later, they're doing some sort of surgery on him, and he only has 3 hearts.
Oh, nice.
Because they took his 4th one.
Yeah, we all had continuity supervisors. I mean, there were people who their entire job on the show was just to notice that kind of stuff, and they're on every show.
Right. Well, we talk about a lot. We love the continuity of As Told by Ginger, with, Ginger's police record gets brought up a lot. That petrified eyeball is always in the works.
Yeah, Jim Duffy, who is one of the producers at Klasky, who was overseeing a lot of the shows, that was a big deal for him, especially with Rocket Power, but with a lot of the other... Rocket Power, there was a map of the whole town. I mean, he felt like he wanted you to have this sense that this was a real place you could go to, and how far away are these to really ground it in a very physical world was incredibly important to him. And even when we would do those crazy perspectives, he would drill it into us to make sure that at least the distances between the characters was realistic, as much as we were stretching the perspectives. And we would discuss do the kids even notice that kind of thing, and he'd be like, no, they do, they will, even if they don't know it, they'll feel it.
All right, well, we are at the halfway point. Congratulations, Patricia. It has been a long but enjoyable journey so far. I'm very excited about the first half and can't wait to see what's coming in the second half.
Yeah, I guess the perfect way to do to cover the halfway mark is to have another holiday special. This time around, we're going to be having an April Fool's Day episode, which there have only been a handful of Nicktoons that have an April Fool's Day episode. The ones that I can think of on the top of my head are Hey Arnold and Rocko's Modern Life. Cat Dog had a Kooky Prank Day, which is their version of April Fool's Day. Then there's the SpongeBob version. So yeah, there's been a handful of them. So let's see how As Told by Ginger does it. So the episode begins with Ginger, Dodie, and Macy reading A Midsummer Night's Dream. And it's kind of funny because, to go a little bit off topic, my aunt just purchased me the complete works of William Shakespeare for my birthday.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, so while they're doing that, Dodie reminds Ginger and Macy that tomorrow is April Fool's Day, and that Dodie is planning on one-offing the April Fool's Day prank that she did last year, and Ginger is planning on doing the same thing.
Right, so just to start off, have to say I love April Fool's pranks. And if those of you who listen to the Friday Night Nicktoons podcast know, Ashli and I both enjoy pranking our listeners. We did pretend to be the Saturday Night Nick Jr. podcast for a day when on April Fool's. And so I'm all about Ginger and Dodie's sort of competitive, try to out-trick each other episode. And let me just say, there are a lot of layers to the pranks on this episode.
Yeah, I also enjoy doing April Fool's Day pranks as well. Just a few years ago, I did a list of the top 10 reasons why modern Nickelodeon was better than classic Nickelodeon. And this was like, you know, not like today in which there are actually some decent shows. I'm talking about like back then when there was like Fanboy and Chum Chum and Breadwinners and stuff like that. And I was talking about like how those shows were amazing and the classics were overrated. And I gotten a lot of hate reactions to it until I actually did posted that this was an April Fool's Day prank.
Oh, so you committed way more than us. I mean, we never explicitly said it was an April Fool's Day prank, but we were pretty obvious.
Oh, geez, I'm looking at Breadwinners. Wow, this looks terrible.
It's even worse when you look at it. Anyway, so continuing on. So Darin climbs through the window, and he learns from Ginger that she's planning on playing an April Fool's Day prank on Dodie. And I just love Darin's suggestion to how to prank Dodie, stuffing her locker full of underwear. But Ginger decides to forge a love letter to the weirdest kid in school named Dustin, who has mismatched sneakers and who's annoying and a spaz. So she writes this love letter while misspelling the word voluptuous. And she puts it into Dodie's locker, and Dodie looks through the locker, and she immediately falls in love.
Yeah, this is like dramatic irony, the episode, you know, we are in on these pranks that the characters who are being pranked are not in on, and I gotta admit, Patricia, it's a little torturous, especially in this Dodie prank, how, you know, she finds a way to actually fall for him. So we think at the beginning.
And, you know, I want to know your thoughts about Ginger pulling off something like this, because at first it would seem like, you know, when you're pulling off a prank, you know, it's for fun, right? But if it's something involving with love, you know, especially if you're that age in which you want to, you know, what you feel like you should, you know, go out with a guy or something if he's really cute, and then you receive a letter saying like, oh, that was a lie. I remember, you know, it was a little bit painful, but I remember receiving a note back in high school from, you know, like, I have a secret admirer or something, and it just turned out to be a complete lie, and I was kind of heartbroken.
Yeah, no, it's kind of upsetting, and it's a little mean, especially for Ginger. It's a little mean-spirited, because it's essentially making fun of this poor kid, right? I mean, we can assume he'd never find out, but it's kind of unlike Ginger.
Yeah, I felt that this was pretty out of place for Ginger. Like, I mean, if maybe she would have, you know, if maybe it would have been a boy that Dodie didn't like, then maybe it would be a little bit more understandable. But if you're playing like something like love, it's pretty serious. And we'll get to an episode in a couple of weeks in which it involves with Ginger and Dodie and a crush on a guy. So yeah, so I wasn't really too crazy about the fact that Ginger would play off a prank like this. So while Carl and Hoodsy are walkie-talkieing Blake, we see the reaction that Blake is going through when he is told that they sold his tonsils to a witch doctor. We see that his eyes are bugging out. We even see like he had like a little nose drip, and he was sweating, and he was hyperventilating, and he was screaming. And then the next morning when they see him in school, he's like falling apart. He's a complete mess.
Oh man. And we do get a return of Dwayne. And thank goodness, he is one of my favorite secondary or minor characters on the show.
Yeah, Dwayne was a lot of fun. So the reason why they're seeing Dwayne is because Joanne threw out the tonsils from Hoodsy's drawer that they were hiding in case that Blake were to go over to the to the doghouse to see if maybe they were actually lying. But no. So Joanne actually threw it away in the garbage, and Dwayne is eating a sandwich and telling them, no, dude, I didn't save those tonsils. I had too much stuff to carry. I thought they were adenoids. And so he tells them how to get over to where he last saw the tonsils, and it's basically like this huge mountain full of maggots and mold and stuff like that. But he tells them to stay away from Vile Valley because the stink will consume you and you will never be seen again. So now Carl and Hoodsy have to make their way through the dump to try to find Blake's tonsils. And it's going to be really difficult because if you ever visit a dump before, it's pretty big. and it's surrounded by, like, thousands of pounds of garbage for everything.
Right. And funny story, to the adenoids bit, I got my adenoids and not my tonsils removed when I was a kid, so that line kind of particularly struck me.
Oh, wow. And we even know that Macy had adenoids as well. Miranda would even mention it a handful of times throughout the series, which is probably one of the reasons why she's, she gets a little sick at points, with the congestion and the stuffy nose and stuff.
Right. I think I got strep a lot, and that's why I had to get them out. I really don't remember. But they are gone, and they are not tonsils. Can't really tell you the difference. Oh, and so when they return to Blake empty-handed, Carl lets off this classic line. He goes, "Well, Blake, a funny thing happened on the way to your tonsils," which is, in my view, a two-layered joke. So we have the, back in the old vaudeville days of the early 1900s, a lot of the, shtick jokes would start with one of the performers saying, "Well, a funny thing happened on the way to the theater," and they would sort of tell this long-winded anecdote. Then we had the Greek Stephen Sondheim musical, "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum," which is a play on that vaudeville joke because ancient Greek people went to forums instead of theaters, that's what it was called. And now Blake is dropping this line. I don't know which he's really referencing, but it cracked me up.
Yeah, it's actually funny because that was one of the very first plays that I ever performed in high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was a minor role. I was actually one of the main courtesans. So I wasn't like a major role, but I actually still have the script, and I watch the movie every once in a while. And I even still remember some songs from the soundtrack.
Right. So I thought that reference was hilarious and so classic Carl. Like, of course he would have that knowledge.
Hey, I mean, Hoodsie was referencing a Joni Mitchell song, so why not?
That's true. That is true.
And so later that night, we have Dodie coming in, and the reason why is because she wants to pick up Hoodsie, and she doesn't realize that Hoodsie is still in the dump looking for the tonsils. And then Macy comes along and says, I'm coming in because my parents won't allow boys. And then Dustin is still following her. And we even see, Dustin coming in like at least a second after Macy comes in. And then she has another amazing line, and she says, "Ginger, meet Dustin, the bane of my existence."
I was reeling from that line. I was like, that is so me. I hate how relatable that was. Remember Dustin? The bane of my existence. Oh, Macy is the best.
And joining us this week, we have one of the storyboard artists who worked on this episode. Last time, we had Eryk Molinsky, who worked on Lunatic Lake. So this time around, we have Darin McGowan. So, Darin, welcome to We're In Between.
How's it going?
We're doing good, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Hey, let me ask you guys a question.
Sure.
How old are you guys?
I'm 31.
And 23.
Wow, that's crazy. So, what's funny to me is, I've been listening to your old shows, and it's strange that, As Told by Ginger has had, a kind of a resurgence, which is a little strange. It seemed like it was popular when it was on, but it seems like it's kind of crazy popular now. Is it?
Yeah, it kind of is. Ever since the airings of the episodes on Nick Splat and, to some extent, maybe to a tiny little extent, maybe our podcast. And I did As Told by Ginger month on my YouTube channel, almost 2 years ago.
Oh, so you're responsible, probably.
Yeah. Let's not be shy about it, Patricia. We are single-handedly responsible for this show coming back.
That's very sweet, but I'm not going to take any credit whatsoever, but thank you.
What we talked about with Eryk 2 weeks ago is that this show aged well, not only in, the general sense, but with the viewers as well. It's one of those shows where I watched it at the time. I must have, when it's premiered in 2000, I was 6 years old.
Yeah, and I was 14. I was in high school.
14?
Yeah, I was
14 would have been perfect.
Yeah, I was 14 when the show came out, and everybody that I knew in high school, they talked about Invader Zim. They didn't talk about As Told by Ginger, so I was the only one.
There's an audience for everything, and there's something about what Eryk and Kate did with As Told by Ginger, and I think a lot of us too. There's so much in it that's fairly grown up. It's all relatable stuff, but it's not stupid. Some of the stories for children's cartoons back then were they're funny enough,
but they're insulting almost. Yeah.
Oh, well, no, I wouldn't say.
Like intelligence-wise, not so much Zim, but I know what you mean. The plots are a lot more intricate. And
just listen to you guys talking about losing Nana Bishop, and that's a bummer. That's a really sad, real story. You know, like that's a real situation you don't see Invader Zim bitching about.
Yeah, that's true. She watches Dr. Fawn Feelings about this segment in which we have this woman laying in a mattress saying that she's going to be alone and miserable. And you know, I'm kind of conflicted with this because, I mean, yeah, you know, talk show hosts always exaggerate a lot of things, but, you know, she kind of brings up to the point, it's like, if you don't have a man in your age that you are, then you're going to end up being sad and miserable. It's like, okay, it's like being forced into marriage. I mean, sure, you know, I mean, if you're able to find the right man.
Sometimes you got to drive those story points home.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Right. When it's a short episode, sometimes you need to sacrifice subtlety for clarity, and I think it's, and plus, Dr. Fond Feelings, she's the worst, but she's such a type. There are people like her.
Did you like how Dodie interrupts herself to turn the TV on and she knows exactly what Dr. Fond Feelings is about to say?
Oh, wow. So that means that Dodie watches it a lot. Oh, my God.
Watch it again. She must have known.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I'll bet Joanne watches it a lot. That seems like her kind of show.
Oh, absolutely.
Wait, who's Joanne?
Dodie's mom.
Oh, Dodie's mom is named Joanne. Okay.
Yeah, I guess we're on a first. I don't know why I went with her first name. Mrs. Bishop.
Yeah, Mrs. Bishop. There you go.
Oh, yeah, Mrs. Bishop. Oh, gotcha.
I was just being overly familiar, I guess.
Well, you didn't like the idea of, Dr. Fond Feelings actually a lady who's, apparently, possibly squatting in a house on a mattress?
No, I mean, it definitely brings in the message, but it just looks really creepy and kind of disturbing, to be quite honest.
It is.
And we haven't even gotten to the dream sequence yet.
Oh my God, the dream sequence! Oh my God.
Yeah,
anyway,
the burrito.
Yeah, the Bachelorette bean burrito.
The burrito. I've never felt so personally attacked by something on this show.
Yeah, now some people are going to be like, I'm never going to Taco Bell or Chipotle ever again.
Right. Well, what's great about this episode is we see how Ginger sees Lois and how Lois actually is. That Ginger has this fear that she's, gonna turn into this old crow without a man. And really, Lois's perspective is, you'd rather be in no relationship than a terrible one. And I think that's a really important lesson, especially for a kid's show.
It's a really thoughtful episode. And what's funny is, Ginger's thinking about her mom. I mean, Lois, I know you guys have been talking about Lois in the last few episodes, and she's, at this point in this, when we were working on the show, we all knew Lois was a really strong character, and she kept improving. You kept getting deeper and deeper into her story. Yeah. With the nurses' strike, the relationship between her and Ginger was really solid. And this is Foutley's Boys is another one where you're like, well, and Lois is kind of going along with it, sure, okay. I don't want to get ahead of you guys in the story.
No, it's fine. We tend to go all over the place a lot of the times.
Right. Okay, good.
Yeah, I do agree. We have another Lois-centric episode, but instead we go over to one that has never been covered before, about a relationship that she has with another man, because, we always see her as the strong single mom trying to raise her kids by herself. So, yeah, I mean, we even talked about this in TGIF, that, yes, it's about time that Lois starts thinking about going out with somebody else. And speaking of TGIF, so we cut into Ginger seeing that Lois is getting herself ready to go on a date. Ginger is, really excited that, that she's going to have a possible date with maybe a guy that she'll have a future relationship with. And then it turns out that it's Buzz from TGIF. And, yeah, Buzz is...
Yeah, my reaction as well. Of all the ridiculous things he does, calling what he does a man's touch just made my eyes roll out of their sockets. Just so condescending, assuming Lois can't do anything herself. I just wanted to reach into the screen and grab him.
I got a question for you guys.
Yeah,
what's up? Are your parents divorced?
Well, my parents separated when I was a kid, but they got back.
Date?
No, they didn't.
Listen, man, my folks divorced, and so this is interesting because I could actually relate to this story quite a bit. My mom dated men. And I mean, that sounds bad. She didn't date a lot of men, but like, I remember this guy came over to the house and we were like, what was strange is he was trying to make a good impression, you know, and it was kind of gross because he was trying to win us over and took us to a boat show or something. And like, wow, what a drag. Like, we don't want to go to a dumb boat show. You know, like, it's just so strange. This is what's great about this story is like, who the hell is Buzz? And gross, he comes with 3 crummy kids.
Right.
It's just an invasion of not only the family, but the story too. And I do like that Carl takes advantage of the situation. That's pretty good.
To me, the interesting dilemma in this episode is how Ginger has this sort of conflict of, would I rather have my mom be in a relationship even though I don't like the guy, or do I want him to dump him and be single again and worry that she'll, you know, grow old and die alone? It's interesting because we see the show through Ginger's perspective. That's sort of the dilemma. Although that's not what Lois is thinking about at all.
Yeah, she's just trying to eat a burrito, you know. And there's nothing wrong, believe me, there's nothing wrong with hanging out by yourself and eating a burrito.
Absolutely not. Oh, that might be a good season 3 quote. I like to pull quotes for the theme song. I might pull that one. There's nothing wrong with being by yourself eating a burrito. That is so true.
Oh, while we're talking about the burrito, now we can talk about the dream sequence.
Yes.
There were 3 of us on this episode, Rob Gooden, me, and Gabby Payne, and I think there was the 3 of us. I looked at the credits earlier, and I remember Ray and a guy named Bob Fuentes, who was new to our crew, and I think that they did some extra stuff. Now, I don't know who did that, because I can tell you which sequences I did, which scenes I boarded, but I don't think I did sequence, because it's a beauty.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's creepy, but it's all... Certainly, it was supposed to be creepy. It's horrifying for Ginger, and Lois is just so feral. Her posture is so feral. She's so, like, animalistic.
Yeah, she's like laying down, face down on her back, and then we have Dr. Fawnfeeling saying, like, on today's show, we have a person who has forgotten to love. Meet Lois. And then in the background, we have this kind of like trippy, multicolored thing, like everything's like swirling, which you could definitely tell that Ginger's dreaming. And when she's watching the TV, she sees that, you know, Dr. Fawnfeelings is interviewing Lois about, like, you know, how does it feel to be alone and pathetic? And then she kind of like, and then Lois has like a slower kind of like more depressing way of speaking. She's like, I still have my kids. Yeah. And then
drunk.
Yeah, drunk. Right. and then Dr. Fallen Feelings is like, well, what happens when when your kids grow up and move away? And then she's like, yeah, what's gonna happen, Mom? And then she says, I still have my mattress and my bachelorette bean burrito. And then she starts sucking it. It's like really gross.
Well, and the bigger question is, she's not even at her house. Like, where is she? Is this like a hotel?
I don't
even happened to Lois?
I don't even know. You're right. That is a good question. What happened?
It's not her bedroom.
No, it's not her bedroom at all. Yeah, it's creepy.
It may be the same background as the earlier
exactly.
Fond Feelings, but...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have a question for you two that's a little unrelated, back to the 3 Sons. Would you watch, let's say, a full season of a spin-off show just about Buzz's 3 sons and their, like, dopey shenanigans?
Absolutely not.
I don't think so.
No way.
I found them so entertaining. Maybe, okay, put Carl in there, too. Like, I think on their own they wouldn't be as entertaining, but Carl messing with them, just classic.
I'd work on it. I wouldn't watch it. I'd work on it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going off on a storyboarding tangent now. I apologize.
No, please. Really we'd love to know everything.
I remember when the girls get chased out of the room, and they're chased by the boys, and then that dumbass Rhesus runs in the other direction. I had him spin around. Did you guys hear there's a chainsaw sound effect? Because I told, I don't know if Ron Noble directed it, but I remember talking to Mark Risley, and I said, he's like Leatherface from Chainsaw Massacre. So did you guys ever see the original Chainsaw Massacre, where at the end, Leatherface is like spinning around with a chainsaw?
Yes, I remember that.
He's just going crazy off in that dirt road, and then he gets hit by the truck.
Yeah.
That's like, Leatherface. He's just spinning around with his vacuum cleaner. It's like a dustbuster or something. So Mark put that chainsaw sound effect in there. If you hear it, that was pretty fun.
Yeah,
and then does it go right into the chicken cartoon? I can't remember. It goes into the cartoon, right?
Yes, that's the next scene, actually.
Yes, I loved that.
Are you just saying that?
No, I really did. That's literally my note in here, is that it was such a refreshing kind of pull away from the usual animation of the show. I thought that was great.
This chicken thing, okay, this is what was nice about working on this show. And, like, Mark Risley would let me do, like, little things. Like, whenever I thought it fit, or if there was an idea or something, some dumb gag, he was totally cool with stupid stuff. And in the script, they were just watching cartoons. But I pitched this idea, like, well, why don't they just watch it? Why don't I cut to the cartoon and then pull out of it and show that they're watching cartoons? And, this chicken, this is kind of funny because I've been drawing this dumb chicken character forever. He was just this stupid chicken. And he, like, smoked a cigar. He was like I don't know what his deal was. But I said, well, how about this if it's like an old 30s style thing? And Mark was like down. He was like, let's do it. And he really went for it. So he did, it's all in black and white. Like, he did it so well that he even chopped it up a little so that it was badly done. And here's some interesting information. Mark did the voices. So that's when it was animated. I know Mark did, hey, some of this, like, hey, whatever, like, when it comes to this farmer who's apparently waiting for a bus. I don't know what, like, I don't know what the story is exactly, but, like, this farmer is just, like, hanging out, dancing, and, like, Mark did this stuff like, hey, her. Oh, he checks his watch, and he goes, her, whatever. Then he pan up to this chicken who, for no reason at all, knocks a piano off the roof onto the farmer. Anyway, Mark did all those voices, and you hear it, like, he actually cuts it, so there's parts where you could tell frames would have been chopped out of it somehow, like it was an old film, or badly edited. Yeah, there's stuff that Mark let me do, and that was one of the dumb things. I don't know if you guys ever saw that. Yeah, because you're going in order. The Twin Peaks stuff.
That's much later, but yeah, we'll definitely discuss about that much later on. But it's funny because the thing that you tweeted a few months ago about the Twin Peaks, that's actually what made me get a hold of you in the first place, because that that was amazing, what you did, and we actually have a very special guest to talk about that episode with, but that's much later. But yeah, that Twin Peaks thing that you did the storyboard for was incredible.
Yeah, that was another one, too. Like, in the script, and this is what happened. Twin Peaks had just come out on DVD, and this is 2002, maybe, and I was, like, going nuts for David Lynch, and I was reading the script, and this scene, I'm like, my God, this would fit perfectly into the Red Room, and I pitched it to Mark, and Mark goes, oh, we'll do it then. Let's just do it. So then Eryk Casemiro flipped when he found out we did it, and he loved it. Like, that was a really big hit. I'm surprised that we actually were able to do it, because, like, sometimes that's what was so nice about this show, creative, and they appreciated, like, if it fit. I don't remember if there was anything that didn't work. You had to know what you could and couldn't do. Well, that was one of those things where Mark just went to town. I mean, the backgrounds were done right. That Twin Peaks thing was a lot of fun.
That's amazing. And also,
but the chicken cartoon was super, super stupid. You want to hear something crazy? You want to hear a little tidbit? This is ridiculous. Mark put my picture in an episode. And you guys tell me which episode this is. Carl and Hoodsey go to with the monkey.
Oh yes, that's driven to it. That's driven to Oh wait, which monkey? Oh, Mr. Licorice. Brandon? But Mr. Licorice. But which episode with Mr. Licorice?
This was the episode where there's a scene when they get to Brandon's house and there's security cameras.
Oh yes,
and
that's
they make him take off his shoes and Hoodsey says he's moist-souled.
Yeah, that's Never Can Say Goodbye. Yeah, that where they, yeah.
Really? Dude, if you watch that, there's a scene right when they walk into the house. There's a scene when they're walking down the hallway. It's barely there. There's photos framed in the hallway. Like, there's a picture of Mr. Licorice in a sailor suit or something else, and there's a picture of me. And it was like some picture somebody took back. One night we all went out or something. It was just this dumb picture of me, and Mark put it in the background. So if you watch it, miss it, but it's like there for a split second before the pan starts.
Wow, I need to watch the episode again. That's amazing.
Strange things like that back then. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. And she apologizes to Ginger and Carl, saying, I hope that you weren't upset that I had to kick out Buzz. I know that he meant a lot to you. And then Ginger was like, Buzz didn't mean a lot to us. He was actually pretty annoying. I just wanted you to have a relationship because I didn't want you to be lonely. And this is one of my favorite lines that Lois says in the entire series. She says, being in a relationship just for the sake of being in a relationship is absolutely insane. You have to let your heart follow you. It's like, that is so great. I wish more people would listen to that.
It's a really poignant show. I mean, it's smart. I mean, it's the stuff I don't know, do you get that these days? You didn't get it a lot back then. This is a good series.
Absolutely, yeah, and she says, miserable, where'd you get that crazy idea? I love that thought, too, sort of, like, she's never indicated that she's lonely or unhappy. It's like Ginger and Carl are enough for her, and a relationship is an added bonus.
And there's nothing wrong with hanging out by yourself, eating a burrito.
Oh yeah, I think that's the big conclusion from this whole episode.
The episode begins with Ginger, Dodie, and Macy at the cafeteria, sitting around and basically being completely bored that nothing interesting has happened. Until Dodie sees that Joaquin, the new transfer student, is making his way into the lunch table, and Dodie starts having a huge crush on him, which is sort of unfamiliar to the huge crush that she had with Dustin in April's Fools, which the episode we talked about a few weeks ago. But this time she's really, really smitten on Joaquin, talking about like, oh, is his eyes this color or this color? Or what kind of shirt does he wear? Or what are his activities? What's his favorite color? And so she sees Joaquin signing up for the school play called Mambo and the Catskills. And it's supposed to be a play about like a girl and her family. They take a vacation and, she meets up with this guy and they have this love for Latin dance, which it kind of reminds me of Dirty Dancing Havana Nights, if you ever seen that movie. Yeah, that's the movie about where the girl and her family go over to Cuba around the 1960s for like a vacation, and then she meets up with the server boy, and he teaches her about dancing, and they start falling in love with one another. And this was like during the Cuban Revolution. It definitely kind of reminded me a little bit about that, but this episode came out 2 years before that movie, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I remember the first time we watched this, we didn't really know what the Catskills were, so we were kind of confused about that, but it's a mountain range in New York, right?
Yeah, it is. The Catskills is in upstate New York, yeah. So are they vacationing in Catskills, New York? Is there a Latin country that has Catskill Mountains? I don't know.
A lot of unanswered questions. This episode is very decidedly not about the musical within the show.
Oh, no. It's not like previous episodes in which it does feature a musical, like you guys were talking about with, Hey Arnold, in which they had the Romeo and Juliet play, and then there was Jimmy Neutron, where they had
there's always a kiss.
Yes.
They love to put kisses in those plots.
I know. It seems like the only play that no, scratch that. I mean, even Cow and Chicken did a play called The Ugliest Sweeney, and it involved with Chicken wanting to get a kiss with the girl, but then Cow had to play the role because, she got sick from some disease. So, yeah, the whole kissing thing was gone, and then it just had like this huge musical number.
And we can't forget about Poopy and Explodey from Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah, but that was showcasing a cartoon. That wasn't a play. Right. But yeah,
That's
exactly.
True, but it's all about that kiss.
Yeah, exactly.
Always.
This is actually the most that we've seen Mipsy throughout the entire series so far. And Mipsy, she's terrible at acting.
Oh, the worst.
So they're all awful. Like, I know it's low-hanging fruit to pick apart middle school acting, but they are so bad.
Ronnie! Yeah. I love you, Ronnie! I'm acting!
But I will say, Macy as a stage manager is perfect. I love that she takes on that role.
Yeah, and of course, Chet being like the worst ever.
Oh my god.
With totally, man. It's like, come on, seriously.
Yeah, he keeps adding words.
So yeah, then so basically after Mipsy does the lead role, then we go to Dodie, who acts incredibly over the top, and she gets so close to Joaquin that he almost falls off the stage. And then Mazursky pairs Joaquin with Ginger, and it's a lot more natural, and so much so that Ginger has the lead role, and Ronnie has the lead role as well, and they're supposed to be the couple, and Dodie gets really upset, and Dodie locks herself in the bathroom, and Ginger calms her and makes a promise that she's going to hook her up with Joaquin, and hopefully that they'll be a thing together, which pretty much backfires in this episode.
Dodie's obsession with Joaquin cracks me up. She's kind of doting on him, and she says, I just love the way his chest goes up and down when he inhales. And I forget if it's Macy and Ginger, but one of them says, Dodie, that's called breathing.
Oh, yeah, she's got a lot of gold lines in this. She says something about, speaking of gold, at some point, she's like, do you think that Joaquin's eyes are brown or brown with gold specks? Just, like, ridiculous tiny little things that she's obsessed with this entire episode. It's very Dodie, though, to be fair.
And so they come up with an idea of creating a love potion. A love potion that is so potent that they'll be able to become millionaires by selling it.
Would you call it a love potent?
Potion.
Just an awful pun.
Why are you like this, Casey? Why are you like this?
I can't stop. You guys need to cut me off. I get carried away.
Someday.
Yeah, and also, he gives Lois the ingredients, and he's saying, like, oh, I want to be able to pursue in other things, and I'm thinking about cooking, which he already did. We already discussed about in the episode Fast Reputation, where he had the food cart, so I am kind of curious on why Lois is curious that Carl would want to do a cooking phase when he already had one. But here's the thing. You see, the ingredients that Carl picks up for the love potion, he wants to pick up things like oysters and chocolate and chili peppers and stuff like that, which it is true that does provide love, but not platonic love. More like arousing love, because those are aphrodisiacs.
Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable, this whole side plot.
But then again, Carl is a kid, and he probably thinks that all these ingredients produce platonic love.
Yeah, his mind isn't in the gutter in this. I'm sure in a couple years it will be, but I don't think he's quite there yet.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, he's not going to be creating an aphrodisiac potion for Joaquin and Ginger to be doing anything other than just going first base. So, yeah, sorry about that, everybody. Anyways, so they have to improvise with the ingredients because Lois can only grab so much. So instead of oysters, they use fish sticks. Instead of pumpkin pie, they use a pumpkin flavored chewing gum. And instead of the saliva of a Spanish fighting bull, they use the saliva of a bulldog. Which, it's kind of funny because Carl wanted to buy the saliva online, and I looked this up, and there is no such thing.
I would assume not, right? Who would that be the consumer for? I mean, who needs such a thing in their lives? Other than Carl, of course, but,
Well, and then at the end, we bring back that classic line/joke that comes back again and again. Carl says, I need to see a man about some saliva.
So Carl decides to whip up the love potion, and he decides very smartly, when Hoodsie gave him the suggestion that they should dump all the drinks that Lois just recently picked up from the grocery store so that Ginger can be able to have this as the only drink that she can be able to have. And Carl and Hoodsie assume that Ginger has already drank it, and so throughout the episode we see that Ginger and Joaquin are starting to become a lot more closer towards one another, especially when they go over to the dressing room, and Ginger learns a little bit more about Joaquin and how they seem to have a lot of things in common. And then of course we get into the scene where they're at the gazebo and they both kissed.
Yeah, and now the sort of main conflict of the episode is in full bloom. Ginger, fighting her own feelings because her friend has sort of claimed a boy. And I don't know, I don't think this episode paints Dodie in a favorable light.
Yeah, which, I mean, she is only human at the end of the day, and I generally appreciate a show that doesn't have a perfect protagonist, right? So I think it's kind of plausible. I mean, usually when you get into these sorts of weird relationshipy feelingsy things, especially for the first time with your friends, things can get a little iffy. But yeah, no, she's definitely not 100% in the right either.
Now, the most important part of this show, the potato chip chicken casserole, can we discuss this? It sounds delicious, but I have never heard of it or had it. A quick Googling reveals this is a real thing. I know, Ashli, we were confused about this on FNN.
I think, Casey, this should go in the list of things where anytime a weird food shows up, I'm like, Casey, we should make this.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah, Ashli and I have... this is worth getting into. Ashli and I have a long history of buying weird desserts, and it all started with Fairly Odd Parents. Was it Abracatastrophe? Where Crocker has an ice cream stand, and one of the kids says, "I want strawberry chunk cake." And we were like, what on earth is that? And we wanted to get some, and then we didn't. And the story is a lot lamer than it sounded in my head, but there you go.
We also found a recipe specifically called strawberry chunk cake online, and we debated baking that for years. We never have. So I think potato chip chicken casserole should go on the list of foods we will probably never make, but are going to pretend that one day we will.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of foods that are shown on Nickelodeon that you want to make for yourself. Like, ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to try, like, what would a honker burger taste like? Or, what about that candy from Jimmy Neutron? Like, what would that taste like? Or
purple flurp.
Or purple flurp, or, maybe fried chicken from Chokey Chicken, or
even a Krabby Patty, of course.
Or even a Krabby Patty, exactly. So yeah, there's always like weird food. I mean, even last year, I did a video celebrating Clarissa Month where I made 3 tofu-inspired dishes because the main Clarissa's mom was a huge fan of cooking everything with tofu. So yeah, that'd be fun if you guys can make like Nickelodeon themed or inspired foods. There's a lot of it in As Told by Ginger. There's the Sloppy Janes, there's the Pigs in a Blanket, there's the the food cart where they have like the fried bunions and the feet loaf and trash potatoes. So yeah, I mean, you could easily make like a Nickelodeon themed cookbook.
For sure, or even a Nickelodeon food podcast. Wouldn't that be something? Specifically, we just try Carl's weird recipes, and we'd have, like, maybe 5% of the listeners we have now.
Yeah. So, of course, Ginger decides that she is going to approach Joaquin saying that she is not interested in dating him, that they just want to be simply friends. And this line that she says about, like, relationships are temporary, but, best friends are forever, I'm very mixed with this.
I think we talked about this too, especially middle school. I can tell you, I have one friend actually who's pretty close, and we were acquaintances back in middle school, but the vast majority of people that I was friends with in middle school, we haven't kept in touch, right? Like, there's some limitations to whether or not that's gonna last forever.
Yeah, same here. Pretty much nobody that I knew in middle school I kept in contact with. I mean, with the exception of, like, in elementary school, the only person I've kept in touch with is Kevin, and I do have a handful of friends from high school and college, but middle school, no. I have not kept in touch with anybody, and, it's the same thing with friends. It's like, best friends are not forever. They can also break up or move on to other things. We even discussed about this in the episode Gym Class Confidential, in which Ginger is concerned about, whether Dodie and Macy are going to be moving on to different things when Macy is not wanting to watch the movie and wanting to grow up just like all the other girls. And we have Lois talking about, that she used to have this friend in college and they used to be really close, but now they just talk every once in a while. So yeah, I mean, I guess this is sort of like Ginger's decision on wanting to keep the friendship with Dodie, but I mean, and don't get me wrong, friendships can last forever, but yeah, I'm kind of mixed with what Ginger said. I mean, it can happen to both cases. I mean, you can have a best friend and you can have a boyfriend, although in this case it doesn't work.
I guess I will say, I think overall, probably more people have stayed friends since middle school than have stayed dating since middle school. And I don't know, obviously, actual statistics on that, but I feel like the average relationship does not last when it starts in middle school, and probably more people have friends from middle school than boyfriends from middle school.
That's fair.
But yeah, forever, bit of a stretch.
This aired on May 12th, 2002. The story was written by Sheila M. Anthony and Paul Greenberg, teleplay by Paul Greenberg, who happens to be with us today. Hello, you guys want to say a quick introduction?
Hi guys, I'm Paul Greenberg.
Best introduction ever. And we also have another guest with us. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Jackie Harris. Hi, I play Macy.
Hi. Yeah, so we had Jackie on the podcast a few months ago, but it's nice for her to come back, especially since this is a Macy-centric episode. Yeah, the episode is about that it's Macy's 13th birthday, and unfortunately her parents completely forget all about it. Meantime, her parents decide to throw her kind of like a surprise birthday party, but along the way they start treating her like she's a 4-year-old. And in the meantime, we have Carl, who happens to be scared of a naked mole rat, and he slowly is having the fear consume him, and he pretty much starts affecting Hoodsy, and they decide to capture the naked mole rat right before the fear pretty much takes over for them. So right before we discuss about this episode, so Paul, how did you and Sheila come up with the story for this episode?
I can't totally remember who came up with the details of it, but I remember the pitch being the parents forget her birthday, and that's where the jumping off point was. And then I remember thinking the idea of two parents that are so out of touch with their kid that they don't even know really how old she is. Because the last time they really celebrated her birthday, she was probably 4 years old.
Wow.
So that was kind of the idea of two professional parents that work a lot, that have a very independent child that kind of takes care of herself. So things kind of slip away from them, and they almost innocently forget her birthday. And the kid, Macy, is so happy just to have her birthday celebrated again. She's totally fine with the fact that they're not really sure how old she is.
Well, that they're paying attention
and
to
that,
her for the
she's
first
getting,
time in forever.
Yes, that she's getting any kind of attention at all is just the most exciting thing in the world to Macy, and makes her so happy.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the entire series, at this point in time, we had never seen Macy's parents. She's always talking about, like, oh, they're out of town, or, oh, they're just really busy with work, and I guess, she's really independent for her age, absolutely, but there's also, we even talked about this in the podcast, Jackie, about, with Macy being so incredibly pure, and being incredibly independent, but at the same time, she still has to conquer a lot of fears. And I guess without her parents around, she pretty much had to do everything by herself.
Yeah, and the irony that her parents, that their profession, their job, that clearly they're successful at, is that they fix people, they take care of people, they tell people how, to live their lives, and yet they're screwing up their own daughter so tremendously.
Yeah.
And I think it's also kind of a known fact that the craziest people are always the therapists, not the patients.
Yeah.
They spend 15 years or something getting their degree, and by the time they're out, they're just mental cases. The idea was, that her parents are even more neurotic than she is. They're the ones who could really use the therapy.
Absolutely. Yeah, her thing with death that's discussed a little bit earlier. And what I found interesting about this episode is that the parents aren't jerks. A lot of the time, the neglectful parents are, like, willfully mean or, like, ignorant of their child. And these are good people, even though they've clearly made a mistake here.
Well, the fact that you see that they know it's her birthday, they have it scheduled in, and they just made a mistake. Like they would get around to it, but she has to be scheduled.
Just knowing the Macy character too, and how what a good person Macy is. You could never imagine that her parents were anything but good people, really. So, I mean, she's just has such a pure heart and is such a good person, and you can see her parents are too. They're just all very intelligent and all very busy. They really do believe they're doing the best for their kid all the time.
And also because she is so independent, they don't feel she's not somebody that's screeching out for attention. And as professionals, they know when things do happen like that. And with her, they don't get that she's fine. She's even fine that they forgot it. Once she gets the attention, I think that's what's so cute is that,
they're all in.
They're all in, and she's loving it. She's loving the attention, and that's why she gets a bit angry at I almost said at Melissa, at Ginger. Paul and I had a show this week, and she showed up, and her baby was moving so much you could see it moving across her stomach. It was insane.
Oh man.
Yeah, I actually saw Melissa talking about that, and she actually posted a picture of you guys and Liz and her husband, and you guys looked really happy. You guys looked like you had a great time, and that was like really sweet. That genuinely made me happy when she was talking about, it's like an impromptu as told by Ginger reunion. It was so sweet.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
To do that so much more often, and now but you know what's great is your podcast has made all of us reconnect.
Really?
Oh, that's so great to hear.
Because I've been in touch always with Liz, but, Melissa and Liz hadn't seen each other. And Aspen and I had completely lost touch. And then we reconnected because of your podcast.
I'm touched. I'm going to cry.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So you guys should know that.
Well, thank you. That really means a lot to me. That really warms my heart. And we learned that both Mipsy and Macy share the same birthday, and they're both the same age. They're both 13, and it's an interesting fact that out of Ginger, Dodie, and Macy's the oldest, and this is pretty. I mean, when I first learned about this, I was pretty shocked because, with the way that Macy would be acting, I always assumed that Macy was the youngest, but no, she's actually the oldest of the girls. And then there's talks about, what Mipsy's going to be having for her birthday. She's going to have karaoke and dry ice and sushi and all that stuff. Sounds really grown up. And we'll later see in the episode for Macy's party that it's the complete opposite.
Well, you know what this episode did, Patricia, is it confirmed my nickname for Mipsy. Do you remember what it was?
Yes, it was Diet Courtney.
Yep, or Courtney Light. She's got all these Courtney traits, but just slightly less so. And I think the party is kind of evidence of that as well.
Oh yeah, especially with Courtney and Miranda singing the Courtney song.
Yes, I was so glad we got that again.
Which, I just want to let you know that we talked to Melissa a few weeks ago on the podcast, and she said that the Courtney theme song was one of her favorites.
It's Courtney. I'm Courtney.
Who's the girl in the pink capri? It's Courtney. Okay, I'm done.
Well, it's great that Miranda just deadpans it off a lyric sheet, too. That was such a great choice.
Miranda needs therapy.
Especially with her dad, yeah.
Absolutely. Her dad being a drill sergeant, her mom, we don't know where she's at. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Paul played the mole expert, Professor
Oh, that's
guy.
right.
Oh, that's awesome.
But that was also because it's that, Paul does a lot of voice work, but it's also just, when he would write it, he'd read it out loud, and Eryk Casemiro would be like, oh, well, there you go, you have to play that,
And even the design of the mole guy, I mean, with the bald head and the buck teeth, it's like literally a mole turned into a human. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's so awesome. That mole was so cute. And I think that kind of came out of an experience you had, Paul.
Working with a rat.
Yeah, we first moved here. Paul was on, Jenny McCarthy had a sketch show on MTV, and Paul was on it, and it was like his first shoot day. We had moved to Los Angeles, and he found out he had to do a scene with a rat. And he was
a real
horrified.
live rat,
he was
and I was
scared.
terrified of rats.
He didn't want to do it. He was freaked out, but of course...
I jumped in, and I just did it anyway.
And he came home in love with that rat.
I love that rat so much by the end of the day.
Right.
I completely conquered my fear of them, and I wanted to keep them, but another crew member took him home and made him a pet.
Right.
And but I had cats, so I don't think that would have mixed too well.
But that's what the mole rat thing, how, once you get over that thing of I'm not going to be afraid of it, and you look at it in a different way, you see it's just a cute little rodent.
Even the scariest thing appears cute to you once you get over your fears.
A squirrel is just a rat with a furry tail.
No, I'm terrified of squirrels still.
See, I love them.
And so then the next morning, they see her while she's sleeping, they wake her up and they give her like a toddler playground and they start treating her like a 4-year-old. And I kind of felt a little uncomfortable with this because, I mean, don't get me wrong, I get that they're giving her attention and all that stuff, but the fact that they're not treating her age appropriate, especially since they're supposed to be therapists, it's kind of sad.
Well, it's pretty pathetic, really.
It's very pathetic. Yeah.
For it's lovely because obviously she hasn't had that. She didn't get that swing set.
No, she's never had a childhood with them.
She didn't get the footy pajamas.
She's having it now instead.
She's having it now. They probably, once she was, They
realized they've neglected her their entire lives. That they were modern parents and they thought she's so independent and smart she could take care of herself. And they were too busy. Mm-hmm. They had this big career. I mean, she's more than happy to take it all in and enjoy it.
To get it all.
I mean, she even sleeps in footy pajamas that night.
Yeah, the footy pajamas and the, being woken up and, it's just amazing. It's like, we all kind of, when you get older and even now, it's like you look back on that time and it's just so cute. So she's finally getting...
We all want to go back there.
I want a bit of that. That's why I think she enjoys it in that sense of like, she's basking in it, She's getting massively full attention. It's like those people who are too busy and then they go on a holiday and they spend all their time together and they, play really do fun stuff together.
And then it's considered, which I always thought was hilarious, so retro by the... I mean, it's funny what's retro to a kid.
And I feel like today the word they would use is ironic. Like they would be all hipster about it,
Yeah, exactly. So going into, Carl and Hoodsy's plot. So Carl is scared of the naked mole rat and he convinces Hoodsy that this is a big deal, that the mole rat can crawl into the toilet. And then Hoodsy's like really scared and he doesn't even use the bathroom anymore.
That's my favorite thing about the episode that was based on
my childhood, I think.
Yeah, fear of not going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
What happened?
Oh, just an experiment. See how long I could go.
That's amazing.
Oh, that's such a kid thing, though.
I was interested in the human body. The incident made me not so interested in the human body after that. But it was nice to be able to mine that for a plot line.
Mine it.
Literally. Right. Yeah, use all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aside from Macy, which is, I think, the best, for my money, the most adorable, the best character on the show.
You have to say that.
But I also think Macy's just the most special character on the show. And I love Hoodsy, too.
A lot of people love Hoodsy.
I love Hoodsy. Hoodsy, Lois, and Macy are my 3 favorites on this show.
They're the ones that I think are, in a weird way, the most far out there, but the most real.
Sure.
Absolutely.
They're the ones that we all, part of us, really identify with these guys.
Yeah.
They're so insecure, but yet honest. They're honest
I'm
characters.
I'm afraid to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, they say they don't hide anything. They say whatever they think. I think the thing for me when I rewatched the episode, I think besides Macy's journey on it, it's the episode where you really see Ginger kind of screw up, and she screws up with the people that she usually is the most authoritative and in tune with person. She really didn't know her friend as well as she thought she knew her. And I think that was really interesting, and Macy surprised everybody. And I thought that was cool.
That's a really good observation. I never really thought of that.
Right from the start. So they're making art, right, in art class, and Carl is making this creepy, like an alien emerging from a tangerine or something like. And then we go over to Hoodsy, and he's making an ashtray, like a pottery ashtray. And the teacher says, but no one in your family smokes. And Hoodsy says, I'm going for more of an ironic statement. What a great line. And then Carl compares him to the Impressionists who were underappreciated in their time. Just your classic, intelligent, funny Carl line. I just love them.
Yeah, absolutely. So with Carl and Hoodsy's plot, well, I guess we'll go to that one first because why not? So it's Brandon's birthday coming up, and Brandon is giving out invitations, and Carl and Hoodsy are not interested in going into the party, so they come up with the excuse that they have paint or they have clay in their hands and they can't pick it up because it'll make it dirty. Then we go over to Ginger's plot, and it starts off with Dodie having a kick me sign on her back, and Ginger removes it, and we're seeing like a bunch of these bullies teasing Ginger, Dodie, and Macy because they're the loser crowd. And so then we have a new girl coming in. Her name is Letitia Bowers, and she's like a goth girl, and she comes in, and the first thing that she does when she sits down is that she pulls out a skull and she puts it next to her desk, and everybody's freaking out. And there's a whole bunch of rumors that are spread around.
Yeah, Letitia's pretty interesting, especially with her dad being a mortician. All these nasty rumors go around. It's like, wait, did her dad kill her mom? And it's like, no, okay, they're just divorced, but maybe the dad accidentally embalmed someone alive. It's some really nasty stuff, and it's interesting because I started off the episode feeling bad for Brandon and bad for Letitia, and by the end of the episode, my pity for Brandon diminishes quite a bit, let's just say.
I don't know. I mean, with Brandon, I can kind of understand that he's going through a lot, but seeing all the previous episodes at this point in time, I don't know. I mean, I kind of don't blame him for the fact that he doesn't have a lot of friends. I mean, he's a weird kid who's constantly overly sweet, and he has his pet monkey, and he's just really weird, and he becomes like a gigantic crybaby.
Yeah, he's just very high maintenance. It would be one thing if he got along easier with others, but he needs to always be in control. But see, I used to like Brandon. I used to defend him, and after this episode, I kind of just ran out of steam for him. Of course, his parents are insane, so I see why he is the way that he is, but I don't know. At some point, he's gotta try to get along with others, right?
Yeah, I guess, throughout the episode, so Ginger, Dodie, Macy, and Darin are at the party, and they're celebrating, and they are basically having a good time, even though that they didn't exactly get the crowd that Ginger promised. And then eventually we have Courtney and Miranda show up, and then they start partying. And then we cut into Carl and Hoodsy are just absolutely bored and miserable. And we have Brandon's father recording everything, and Brandon's mother having like a checklist and serving cake with no sugar, and Carl not putting his feet on the furniture, and Brandon slowly opening up his presents, and Brandon's mom is doing a checklist. It's just so controlling and just really confined and constricted.
Yes. I don't know. I guess I am a full Brandon convert at this point, and the party is just... Oh, it's just sad, Patricia. It's so uncomfortable and so upsetting.
Yeah, I did mention that there was going to be something like that in Never Can Say Goodbye, in which would have a sad moment with Brandon, so here it is.
Yeah, that's true. It's just pathetic and upsetting to watch.
It's even more pathetic when we find out that when Carl and Hoodsy are leaving the party, Brandon begs them not to leave because apparently he told his parents that he's the most popular kid in class.
Oh. Like, why would he do that? That's just stupid.
It's really dumb. I don't get it. Why would you tell your parents that you're the most popular kid in school? What does that give you? I don't get it. Yeah, if Brandon wasn't such a crybaby and he wasn't so obsessed with Mr. Licorice, and maybe his parents weren't so uptight, maybe he could have friends, and he could, have people over for sleepovers and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's clear that his parents are as oblivious about the world as Brandon is, so I guess they would buy him, but, they know their son. They must know that he can't be the most popular kid at school.
It's really pathetic. So the episode begins with Ginger, Dodie, and Macy over in the locker room, and Ginger is really excited because she wrote another letter for Sasha during American history class. However, Sasha has not written a single letter or called her whatsoever after Summer of Camp Caprice, which was the last episode that we saw him in. And so she has been thinking about Sasha a lot lately, and she wants to find a way to see him, and she's able to find a way because the band, the Lucky Junior High band, is going to be having a competition around Sasha's school, and she wants to sign up for the band so that she can be able to have a chance to see him again.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, this isn't a good reason to join the band. I was in high school band, of course, as we've talked about, and I don't know, I'd be a little annoyed if somebody joined and kind of made a mockery of it by joining just to, stalk some boy at another school. So, not the greatest intentions, Ginger, but to be fair, she does at least try to learn. So, there's that.
Yeah, but she's still way too distracted about thinking about Sasha while jeopardizing a major competition for us, competing against another middle school. So basically, Ginger approaches the teacher, asking if she can be able to play any instrument so she could be able to join the band, and unfortunately, everyone is taken. However, by plot convenience, we have this kid who comes in and says, I have to drop out of the band because I need to get my grades higher, and he plays the extra grande triangle. So Ginger has to play the triangle, and it just leads up into it's a giant triangle. You have to wear it. It looks really heavy.
Yeah, the extra grande triangle, I should say, doesn't exist, but I love that name. It just gives it this sense of importance to the band,
It sounds like a quesadilla that you would get from Taco Bell.
It absolutely does. The extra grande triangle. Yeah, I'd try it. Should we add that to our recipe book?
Yeah, exactly. We should add that to our Nickelodeon cookbook. Extra grande triangle quesadillas. Yeah. Trademark. So yeah, let's cut over to the Carl and Hoodsey plot. So Carl and Hoodsey find out that Blake's family is going to be purchasing a tomb, and they want to be able to have 1% of the tomb, and they have to pay $10,000, and they think about getting jobs. And I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Just because you were buried in a tomb does not make it immediately that it was an Egyptian pharaoh. A lot of other people were buried in tombs. There was the high priest, loyal servants. So, yeah, I mean, and Blake never specifically says what tomb the family purchased. It could be anybody. I mean, if it was the tomb of Tutankhamun, then absolutely, I'd like to get a piece of that, but no. It is a generic tomb, and Carl and Hoodsey want to have a piece of it.
For sure. Yeah, it is a little problematic, but I guess with kids, you sort of make that leap with little information. And I love that we sort of get a callback to full capitalist Carl and Hoodsey, except this time they're looking to be employed, not employ themselves, which is an interesting concept.
Yeah, they look through the newspaper to try to find jobs, but every single turn that they see, there's absolutely no way. They don't have degrees, they're not old enough, so they decide that they want to be psychics. They want to be psychics so that they can be able to predict other people's future, and they get profit for it. And here's the thing. You see, remember a few months ago in Fast Reputation, in which you and Ashli were talking about how the food cart was a great idea because they're actually providing services, like good services to everybody who purchases the food. and it's an honest service. This is a lie. This is a flat out lie. It's a major manipulation, and the fact that Carl thinks that he's a psychic just pretty much boils down to the fact that this idea from the very start is not going to work.
Yeah, clearly, and he does believe his own powers, and I assume all psychics do, or many, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's a scam. It gets into sort of Ed, Edd, and Eddy territory.
Yeah, exactly. And just like with Ed, Edd, and Eddy, their scam pretty much becomes a complete bust.
Exactly, yep. I will say, the kids 100% buying into Carl's made-up nonsense is so typical. Like, kids eat that kind of stuff up. I remember I had a business in late elementary school that we were a paper company, but we would make like paper boats and paper hats and paper footballs, and then we would sell them, and it became this huge hit, and the school had to actually ban them because the kids were so into this little like home business. So it seems like a similar thing.
So you really related a lot to Fast Reputation.
Oh yeah, I probably should have brought it up then, actually. Yeah,
that's okay, don't worry about it.
Well, first she sees him on the football field while the rest of the band is practicing, and she just neglects the band, of course, to go talk to a boy, like you do. She goes up to Sasha, and, you know, he's like, "Oh, Ginger, what are you doing here?" And there's clearly something he's not telling her. He's like, "Sorry, I didn't respond to any of your letters." And she's like, "Well, we're here now, it's okay, it's all forgotten." She's just so love-struck, and man, it's just a bummer, because you can tell he's keeping something from her. And like we said in the description, he ultimately reveals that he has a girlfriend, and Ginger is completely devastated.
Yeah, not just a girlfriend, but we even heard the description that before he left for Camp Caprice, he broke up with his girlfriend named Clover because she started dating another guy who was popular. And so when Courtney was spreading the rumors about like, oh, Ginger has Ian as a boyfriend, he pretty much became devastated. And then like toward the last days, that's when they started to get along. But then like, I guess when he got back home from Camp Caprice, that's when they started dating again. And this girl, long blonde hair, tiny short shorts, she's basically like Courtney if she was a little bit more sluttier. And yeah, I mean, and she has like a snooty voice. It's like, "Oh, there you are, Sasha, hanging around with these band dorks. No offense." And then when Sasha introduces Ginger to Clover, she is heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. So in conclusion for Sasha, he is a hypocrite because he pretty much disses Ginger throughout the entire episode of Camp Caprice because, you know, the rumors were spread that she was going out with Ian, but that was a complete lie. And then when he got back home from Camp Caprice and he promises to Ginger that they were going to see each other again and they were going to have a relationship, he goes back with the girl who was popular that broke up with him for a guy who was already popular. So yeah,
fair enough. And he could have just written her back once and let her know the deal, you know? It wouldn't have been hard.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't have been difficult. He could have said, "Hey, Ginger, haven't heard from you in a while. I have some unfortunate news. I'm seeing somebody else." Instead of having Ginger travel 2.5 hours and ending up with her heart broken. So, yeah, way to go, Sasha. This is why I hate him.
Yeah, first off, what a great title. This is one of my favorite titles of all the episodes of the show.
Yeah, exactly. It's based off of the movie Mommie Nearest, except that it's nowhere near as disturbing or abusive. And while Dodie and Macy and Ginger are doing avocado masks, Courtney and Lois got back from the grocery store and they start talking and they start actually bonding with one another, which is actually pretty nice. A Courtney and Lois episode. This is something pretty new. We've seen a handful of times that Courtney and Lois do know each other. Episodes such as Of Lice and Friends and The Nurses' Strike, in which they do mingle with one another. And this is the first time in the entire series so far in which Courtney and Lois have a strong bond with one another.
Right, and it's kind of foreshadowed in that earlier episode, so I thought this was a nice follow-through on that, like Courtney's fascination with and jealousy of the Foutleys.
Yeah, absolutely. With Courtney, she's just so fast. I mean, we follow throughout the series at this point, such as, with episodes such as Ginger the Juvie and even Carl and Maude and Sleep on It, that Courtney has a fascination for Ginger's and the Foutley simple middle-class life. And she's questioning about, like, what is this robot in your closet? What, Courtney, that's a vacuum cleaner. It cleans for you? How fascinating. You could teach me so much. So basically this is a case in which Courtney is starting to learn more about life that is outside of the privileged life that she's been accustomed to. And it's nowhere near as painful as her experience in Summer of Camp Caprice.
Yeah, that's true. And getting over to the Carl Hoodsey plot, I just have a quote. You can explain the plot itself, but they're sitting in front of the TV, and Hoodsey says, "Don't they know we're the irony generation?" And Carl says, "Yeah, nothing impresses us." Or maybe it's reverse. I forget who said which.
It is reverse, and it's one of my favorite lines in the series, because isn't that true?
But then they see chin implants on the TV, and Carl goes, "Chin implants?" Like, he's so impressed and excited. So I love how they double back on that logic right away.
Yeah, so basically Carl wants to be like Jay Leno, in which he has a massive chin.
Or the Crimson Chin.
Oh, they're pretty much the same person.
Right. He voices him.
Exactly. So it's pretty much the same thing, except that it's Jay Leno as a superhero. But yeah, it's basically like Carl is so fascinated by a giant chin that he wants to have surgery so he can be able to get one. And and then Ginger just becomes incredibly jealous of Courtney because her and Lois are spending so much time together. I mean, I don't know. I feel, in my opinion, the way that Ginger acts in this episode is really out of character because with her being incredibly jealous, I mean, we've seen throughout the series that her and Lois get along really well. The nurses' strike is a prime example on that. So seeing Courtney just incredibly happy and she's helping out in the house, and, Ginger had no reason to be angry like that. She should have just let Courtney be who she was. I mean, we've seen throughout the series that Courtney is the popular kid and she wants to learn everything about this. And Ginger was more than happy to teach her about, showing around her room and teaching her about how to do slumber parties. So seeing Ginger pretty much say, "Okay, I had enough with you," just seems really, really out of character.
Right. Yeah, it does. There's a couple out of character things in this episode.
Yeah, and so basically, so Carl finds one of Lois's foot arches, and he decides to use that as a chin, and
It's so great.
Yeah, and combined with Joanne's face makeup, it looks like a legit chin, and it's kind of freaky.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of... go ahead.
Him acting like it, like people are suddenly so intimidated by him, and it's really funny to me. And when he gets insecure about, like, can I actually do this? He ultimately decides that the chin is not worth the price, because he says, "I may rule the world, but my chin will rule me." Such a good line.
Everybody's just freaked out by it because it's literally like a freak of nature. No 10-year-old boy should be walking around with a chin that massive. But yeah, it pretty much gets in the way with him, for him, and he decides to remove it and do away with it forever. He even buries it and puts a rock on top so that it could never come back again. And I just really love the moment in which when, Carl gives out the generic lessons about be careful what you wish for and be glad with what you have. And then he pretty much says to Hoodsey, do you think that that'll stick? And then Hoodsey's like, not a chance. No.
This one aired on June 16th, 2002. It was written by Emily Kapnick, and it was directed by Mark Risley, who, in a really exciting turn of events, is here with us today. Hello, Mark. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, right before we discuss about the episode, so what was the story behind it?
Well, it's been quite some time ago, but I remember Emily coming to my office and handing me a newspaper article Gosh, and I think that, like I said, it's been a long time ago, but I think that this story is based on a personal experience she had. I think that she actually wrote a poem, and she was gone, but something similar, and a counselor at school took it as meaning that she wanted to commit suicide. And, I think somehow, and I'm probably butchering this, you'll have to ask Emily herself, but somehow along the way the poem won a contest or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in this episode, Ginger writes a poem about a girl who wants to disappear for a competition. When Ms. Zorsky reads it, she believes that Ginger is suicidally depressed and makes her see the school psychologist. In the meantime, we have Carl testing a vanishing powder on Noelle Sussman, who he thinks is a nobody. When Noelle disappears, Carl deeply regrets it. And this is the third of 3 episodes that was nominated for an Emmy Award for Outstanding Program in less than 1 hour.
That's right, a primetime Emmy Award.
Yes.
3 consecutive, right?
For sure. Well, that's really interesting to hear that it was based on Emily's personal experience. We've had a few storyboard artists and writers and other people who've worked on the show who have said similar things of like, this little aspect of the show happened to me, and so I put it in, a bit about Hoodsey refusing to go to the bathroom to see how long he could make it, and stuff like that. Some of these things are based on real people's experience who worked on the show, so that's really interesting.
Absolutely. And even Noelle Sussman, who plays such a critical role in this episode, an interesting backstory with her is that she was an incidental character that we created in season 1. You'll see her in season 1. I think she wears a football jersey that said number 52 or 56 on it or something. And that was because she was incidental number 56, because we make hundreds of them to fill out the backgrounds, right? And Emily saw a gnomish character, and she took a liking to the character, and she expanded her role into this character, Noelle Sussman. And I think that this isn't all that uncommon in this business. I think the same thing has happened with perhaps Apu and a few other characters on The Simpsons and other shows.
Yeah, Eryk Molinsky, who was one of the storyboard artists and we had on the podcast a few weeks ago, he discussed about Noelle, talking about like how the storyboard artists like to add her in certain scenes, and that the writers loved her so much that they decided to make her into a main character.
That's exactly right, yeah.
All right, so so let's start off with the opening, and the opening is unlike any episode of As Told by Ginger, not only to this point in time that we're at, but pretty much throughout the entire series. It opens up with a crow that's flying around, going first person, and we just see the background is really, really dark and gray and somber. It is a brilliant opening to setting up the tone for this episode.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to give credit where credit is due in that opening sequence. And I mean, not only is Jared's music phenomenal in that opening, that a storyboard artist named Al, or also known as Alan Zegler, is heavily responsible for the look of this episode. I work very closely with any of the storyboard artists on all of my shows, but Al is a real special case. Like, he was so brilliant that he was almost nuts. And I've talked to him about this, but I'm talking behind his back. When this script crossed my desk, and I knew immediately, everyone knew when this script came through the production office that this was a very special script. And so I went to Al, who was fairly new on the production. I think the first show that he worked on was maybe Class Confidential. And I went to him and I said, I knew I could see his brilliance, and I went to him and I said, this is an opportunity for you to really shine. I want you to design the opening and the closing and all the moments with the girl in the poem. And he delivered like nobody's business. But being a storyboard artist, the storyboard artists are responsible for doing sequential drawings that cover, X amount of time within the show. And Alan had gone in and done some brilliant stuff. For every scene, he blocked out the entire scene and the mood of the scene in an individual drawing, but he did not do the individual panels. And he was so out there, I could never get him to finish the storyboards. Mm-hmm. So, even though it's absolute brilliance, all the stuff with going down with the puppet strings and the whole schmear. But another storyboard artist who was my nuts and bolts guy, Max Martinez, he took Alan's drawings and made them sequential and made them work the way they do. And so those two guys are heavily responsible for the look of this very special episode.
Then eventually when Ginger's at home and she's making tea, she goes into an old-fashioned typewriter and then she starts typing. And this is another brilliant moment in which the typewriter just starts swirling down and it turns into the puppet strings where the girl is attached to. And then, Ginger starts saying the poem.
In those scenes, you'll see that there are mountains made out of letters. They're typed letters.
Yes.
Yes, I love that.
And there's something very unusual happened during production. Those were represented in the storyboards very roughly, but by the time that they went through designs, the designers based their background designs on the storyboards, and they got on film, we found that there are word search words in there that nobody intended to put there, like Capnick and other things. And if you watch those scenes and you pause and do a word search on them, you'll find the people's names. It was very strange how that worked out.
Wow, so basically it's just people's names but all jumbled up with the word mountains and the letters that are on the ground.
That's right.
Wow. So the poem continues and the girl is running away, and then there's a huge crack on the ground and steam comes out, and that cuts back into Ginger checking on the tea kettle, and she continues to say the poem out loud. And then of course we have Lois coming in thinking that she's talking to the tea kettle, trying to make friends with an inanimate object.
Yeah, that's a great scene.
Carl and Hoodsey go over to a joke shop and they buy vanishing powder. And they want to use it against somebody that they think no one would miss. And they choose Noelle Sussman, who pretty much from the very beginning has been in the background of every single episode. Well, I mean, most episodes anyway. But yeah, she's pretty...
Well, that's a clever idea, then, given the backstory that we now have of, how she was this literal background character, so who better to make disappear in Carl's deluded mind here.
While Carl is pouring the vanishing powder all over Noelle's desk, Noelle then starts acting really weird. She has, these finger puppets of Mrs. Gordon, Hoodsey, Brandon, and Carl, and she's, mocking their voices. And Carl and Hoodsey think it's the funniest thing they've ever seen, instead of being insulted. It's awesome.
There are three lines in this episode, and it's not necessarily a comedic episode, but there are three hilarious lines to me in this, and I just watched it again for the first time in maybe 5 years. This scene where Hoodsey says, "Is that thumb finger supposed to be me?" That cracks me up. Thumb finger. The other one is, and it'll come up, I don't mean to steal your thunder if you're going to talk about it later, but it's when Dodie says, "At times like these, when things are going wrong for my mom, she goes in the bathroom and screams into a hand towel."
Yeah, there's some pretty rough implications there.
And at the end, Vincent says, "Carl, you're selling us up the river." And she wrote it intentionally, but it's down the river, but it's a kid, I don't know why that one.
Right.
And they try so hard to be smart. My favorite line of this episode, and it's become one of my favorite lines in the whole series, is only one word. So first, we'll get to their plot-wise, but, Noelle goes up to Carl and says, "This is what my voice would sound like if we were underwater," and it's this sort of gargly underwater voice. And Carl pauses and looks at her and just says, "Amazing." He's so impressed by her, and he just realizing, oh my god, we click on this higher level. She gets it.
There's a beat there. There's a quiet beat there where you're not sure if he's going to say, "Is this girl crazy or what?"
Exactly. And then he adds a little later, "Where have you been all my life?" And she can't hear him at that point. Just a great moment.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so when Ginger finds out from Ms. Zorsky that she has to see a school psychiatrist, she becomes really concerned because all she did was write a poem. Then she told Dodie and Macy about it, then she starts reading it, and once again we see more animations with the girl and just her laying down in a shallow pool of water. Her running back, being chased by something, and then eventually her being enveloped by light. And then we have Courtney and Miranda showing up saying, "Oh man, Ginger, I mean, I always wanted you to disappear, but I didn't know you wanted to disappear.
And Cree delivers that line like nobody's business. I was just watching the episode. She delivered that line perfectly.
Yes, yes.
And then, of course, because Courtney is wanting to have the center of attention, she goes all goth, and she dyes her hair black, and she starts crying all the time, just saying, "Oh, Ginger, it's not always about you. Oh, boo-hoo."
And the therapist calls her on it, too.
That scene is that, I was watching it again, as I mentioned, and it's one of the few, at the animatic stage at Klasky Csupo, we would have screenings at the animatic stage. The animatics are beautiful, by the way, and I have a copy of this one if you ever want to see it. It's
yes, please. Yes, please. We would love to share it with everybody.
So we would do these screenings, and after the animatic, there was a big crowd gathered outside, a lot of shaking of hands. This kind of stuff didn't happen regularly. Everyone was so impressed with it. And again, at the finished episode stage where we would do screenings, same thing, lots of handshakes, and people were just, the most excited about this episode of any episode that I worked on at Klasky Csupo. But I was concerned about, after watching the finished version, and I made I approved all the color and all that stuff, but when I saw Courtney with the black hair, I had second thoughts about, gosh, am I muddying the waters about the girl, right? The girl is Ginger, right?
Yeah.
She's a proxy, right? But Courtney doesn't have anything to do with it. So am I making this B story or this C runner, too important? But after watching it after 15 years, I think I made the right decision.
Right.
Yeah, she's
I think so too.
She's essentially trying to be the depressed girl in Ginger's poem. She's trying to get attention just for the sake of not losing it, because everybody's talking about how Ginger's poem is basically her going through suicidal depression. Ginger's going to school therapy, and Courtney wants to get a piece of that. And so that's basically just Courtney crying, complaining. I mean, it's like one of the first prime examples that we see somebody complaining about first world problems.
She has plenty of those.
Yeah, so going back into Ginger's plot, so Ginger starts becoming a lot more concerned that everybody thinks that she's a total nutcase. And then, of course, Lois, being the amazing mom that she is, comes by and lets her know that she shouldn't be afraid to express her feelings, and that the only person who should know personally about her is herself. And just, seriously, that's so great. I love Lois. She's one of my favorite.
That's the kind of thing that gets you, right? Yeah, and that scene, and you'll see where the writing and the visualization really come together in that scene is by the sink, right? And the focus racks through the window from this very touching scene with Lois and Ginger to Carl and Hudson bailing out of the doghouse, running off to do their thing. That was, it stuck with me. I forgot that shot, but it really tied the two stories together, beautifully done, seamlessly done.
And plot-wise for this one, it's pretty predictable. There's not a ton, besides the ending, of course, there's not a ton in the main plot that is surprising, and it's very similar to previous episodes, like when Ginger becomes the new Courtney.
Yeah, this plot line is one of my least favorite plot lines for Ginger, because it is so forgettable. It is so bland. There's nothing really special about it. It feels like a mishmash of previous episodes. I would have pretty much dismissed it altogether. But, damn it, Carlin Hoodsy's plot is so good.
Oh, it's really good. Oh, man.
I mean, people still talk to this very day about this particular Carlin Hoodsey plot because it is so memorable, and it just sucks that it's in an episode this bland. So basically, Carlin Hoodsey learned from their music teacher, who we saw in the episode The A-Ticket, and he is basically their temporary teacher because Mrs. Gordon has decided that she is going to retire, and she had pretty much been fed up with Carl's pranks, and Carl is really upset about this, and he decides that, man, I gotta get Mrs. Gordon back, and he tries everything that he can to bring her back, but with no avail.
Yeah, I do love when they decide to dress up in, like, top hats and tuxes for their first their first tactic. There's this jazz music, these like brush strokes and muted trumpet when Carl and Hoodsey are dressed up in class. They get all classy, and it's so funny that that's their image of class.
Yeah, exactly. Put a tuxedo and a top hat and you're first class, baby. So it's like you know, Jack Dawson from Titanic. Put a tuxedo on and you're with the higher ups. There you go.
There you go. So this episode is really similar to Mean Girls in my book. Just, you know, from Hope going from nobody to somebody and then immediately putting that same awful bullying that, you know, she had felt from Courtney back on her, which, to be fair, Courtney probably deserves to be treated how she's treated in this episode just for a little bit. But at the same time, you'd think Hope would know how it feels to be an outcast and wouldn't exclude others.
I mean, just immediately, Hope becomes instantly popular, and she has these one-liners that pretty much destroys Courtney every time that Courtney tries to make a comeback. Like about how, you know, I get good grades in school because I'm smart. Your parents probably buy you your grades. It's like, damn, that's a massive burn.
Yeah, it's a really kind of intense accusation. And it leaves Courtney completely flabbergasted.
Yeah, it's so flabbergasted that she can't say anything, and all of her friends ditch her. Even Miranda ditches her.
Yeah, Miranda switches sides so quickly, which is really typical of Miranda.
But Miranda, remember, she pretty much has no leeway, because if without Courtney and without the popular kids, she pretty much has nothing. Remember Trouble in Gal Pal Land?
Right.
So, yeah, it's like, as long as things don't look good for her, you know, she's gonna be miserable. If things do work out for her, even if Courtney goes through something bad, she is gonna immediately ditch her. It's like, you know, hey, Hope, wait for me, your new BFF is coming. It's,
For sure. Yeah, and I love that Courtney can't even remember her own last name because she's irrelevant now.
Yeah.
That was really funny.
And Courtney's just a massive wreck. Her hair is like unkept, and she's wearing like some sort of like dark sweater, and she's really unhappy. The mascara or the eyeshadow is like, consuming her eyes. She looks like one of those, washed up has-beens, like with celebrities, in which, you know, she used to be something, but now she's nothing anymore. It's really sad. You know what? Screw this episode. This episode is really irrelevant. That's not why people remember it.
Yeah, let's get into it.
We remember it because of Carl's plot, and can we talk about the song that Carl sings to Mrs. Gordon?
I love it so much. It's so classy. It's so Sinatra. So smooth, and the lyrics are great. It's clear that Carl wrote them, you know? Oh, I just love that song.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then Carl, he begs Mrs. Gordon to come back, and all she says to him is, "No one likes a kiss up Carl," which is a line that she said in the episode The Right Stuff, in which when Blake is disqualified from the science fair, and Carl said, "Gordo, it's you who is the genius," and then she says, "No one likes a kiss up Carl."
I thought she says it to Higsby, too.
Well, actually, she says, "No one likes a suck up Brandon."
You're right.
Okay, you know what? Casey, why don't you talk about the ending?
Sure, yeah. So I did a little research on this, and the episode was originally going to end that Mrs. Gordon is won over by Carl's antics and decides to, we see her decide to come back, but the original ending was just that she does. Unfortunately, I guess around the taping of the episodes, that the actress playing Mrs. Gordon died of cancer shortly around the time of this episode being recorded. So they changed the ending where Mrs. Gordon, unfortunately, passes away suddenly before she comes back, and all we see is Carl starts crying, and the episode ends to no music, and it says in memory of Kathleen Freeman, who voiced Mrs. Gordon. So it's a really upsetting ending, but I thought it was a great tribute to her and her career.
Yeah, I have to admit that when I first saw that, I bursted into tears. I just cried so much because I mean, you have to understand. You see, we've had a lot of Nicktoons in which a lot of voice actors, they've died because of unfortunate circumstances of old age. You know, the original voice of Grandpa Lou passed away. The original voice of Uncle Iroh passed away.
Uncle Iroh, yeah, Mako.
Yeah, Mako passed away. And, but here's the thing. They were replaced by other voice actors. And I'll just let you know right now, Mrs. Gordon's never coming back. Nobody's going to replace Mrs. Gordon with another voice actress. So yeah, she's gone for good.
Yeah, that's really shocking and upsetting, but I thought it was a really touching way to handle it. And I hope it's addressed again. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Ginger is starting to notice about Mr. Gardner in a different way than we've seen her react to other teachers in the series.
Yeah, that is true. I don't know, this episode, I've been going back and forth on how I felt about this one overall. I think everything is within character that happens. I think that Ginger just gets carried away, and we've all had that moment where, like, you start to believe something, and you ask your friends who are obviously biased towards you, and they confirm it, and you're like, oh, well, my friend said it, so it has to be true, and you just convince yourself that something is going on that isn't. That's pretty much what happens here with Ginger and this teacher, and I don't blame Dodie and Macy. They did what I think most friends that age do, which is validate, regardless of truth.
Exactly. But it's so uncomfortable. Like, Casey, you thought that Arnold and Miss Felter was uncomfortable? No, I feel more uncomfortable about this. Like, this is so awkward. The fact that she is dreaming about him, and she has, like, these weird little dream segments in which, you know, she gets shot with Cupid, and she sees, Mr. Gardner as, like, I'm going to quote something from Hey Arnold, as a bronze Greek god. So, yeah, it's a little bit awkward. I mean, here's the thing. This is a trope that I've seen in numerous shows about the student having a crush on the teacher.
And I will say that the B plot with Carl and Hoodsey, this was the exact episode where I'm starting to feel like this is getting really formulaic. The show, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just, Ginger is going through something awkward and, like, pubescent, and Carl and Hoodsey do something crazy, often involving an animal. It's not necessarily a criticism, just something I'm noticing is that it's really fallen into a routine.
Yeah, exactly. This plot is just, this episode is really relying on the formula that was built up in previous episodes, which in my opinion makes it a little bit stale. When, throughout the beginning of season 2 was when things were really starting to, become a lot more interesting and really breaking up the formula that was featured in season 1. But I guess for season 2, they were starting to run out of ideas, or they were saving up a lot of their ideas for season 3, which we'll definitely get to in the next couple of weeks. And so they decide, okay, we're going to free this groundhog right before they reveal it on Groundhog's Day to see if it sees a shadow. And then they're going to buy off our scarves to, find old Pete. And yeah, this is your typical Carl and Hoodsey plot in which they're going to be scamming somebody so that they can be able to make a profit.
Yeah, I have to agree with your assessment that you weren't feeling it. It gets a little Ed, Ed, and Eddie for me, and that's not what this show is. The scamming, Carl usually takes the honest route, even if he sometimes gets there through dishonest means.
Yeah, I guess this is why for some people they kind of criticized As Told by Ginger when it first came out, because they felt it was like really stereotypical and cliche, which, episodes like this do not help it whatsoever.
Right. And of course, we know better. We know that it's a nuanced, incredible show, but not every episode is.
But seriously, Carl and Brandon singing that Teen Seal Girl song was pretty hilarious. And with Hoodsey's face, it's so priceless.
Yeah.
And then Ginger, immediately says, okay, it's official, guys. I have a huge crush on him. And they're, really excited. And I'm like, no, come on. You're 12. He's 40.
Yeah, how she doesn't get that. And she does at the end. She says, I feel so stupid or whatever. And I don't know. We'll get to my favorite line of the episode in a bit, unless you feel like we're there already, the lowest moment.
I really don't care. Let's just do it.
First Lois says, you're not the first student to have a crush on a teacher. You're just the first to do it on public access, which was so shady and great. then, they're in the bathroom, and Ginger's all upset because she confessed her love to him during the quiz, and it was so uncomfortable and embarrassing, and why did she do that? It's rough. And Dodie's comforting her in the bathroom, and Lois comes in, and Dodie goes, I better go and leave this to a professional. And, Dodie realizing her place for once was some great character growth. And then when they're in the bathroom, we get to the quote that really resonated with me. She says, Lois says to Ginger, you'll have a lot of crushes in your life. Some will make sense, others won't. You just gotta learn to recognize the difference. And that really hit me like a ton of bricks. It's there is this sort of every crush you have, I feel like media tells us to tell them, you have to tell them. And there are some where if it's not gonna work out or it can't, sometimes it's okay to know that it's a crush that doesn't make sense and let it pass, because it will pass. I thought that was some of the best insight Lois has ever delivered on the show.
Yeah, definitely. And with Ginger knowing about her crushes with Ian and Sasha in the past, she's starting to learn a lot about that than compared to season 1, in which she only had a slight crush on Ian, even though that didn't go anywhere. Then she started developing the crush on Sasha, which happened throughout the late season 1, early to mid season 2 area. Now Ginger is really starting to learn about love and a crush. So I guess that is an important lesson, but the destination is good. The journey is a massive train wreck. The fact that the quiz is happening and she's not saying a single answer to any of the questions. She's just incredibly nervous about, should I ask him? Should I not ask him? Should I wait? Should I say right away? And so, because of her incompetence, saying, Mr. Gardner, I was wondering if we can go out for dinner or something. And then, that pretty much just lets the other school take advantage of the fact that, Ginger didn't say the right answer to the question, and so they were able to win for the 8th year in a row. And they were really close to winning, too. So, yeah, Ginger pretty much just blew it for her entire class. And, this is something that she actually trained for. We actually read a comment a few weeks ago from someone who said that, when in Ginger Solo, she piggybacked on, winning a competition for something that she didn't earn. And now she pretty much blew up a competition that she worked really hard on over for something so petty.
Right. Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
And I'm hoping that this episode is better than last week. So, let's get this over with. Let's go to season 3 already.
That's right. I forgot you're not a end of season 2 fan. You warned me.
Yeah, seriously, let's do this. So the episode begins with Ginger, Dodie, and Macy entering into class until they find out that Ms. Zorsky is sick with the flu, and they're gonna get a substitute teacher. And then they find out that the substitute teacher is a really mean and nasty substitute teacher who tells them to do all these things like no talking, no passing notes in class. They have to stare at the wall, and if they go out of line, then they're gonna be then they have to write like 15,000 word essays about some really obscure subject. And let me just mention that the teacher in this episode is voiced by Billy West.
That's hilarious. I did not realize that. That's great. First quote that sort of set the tone of this episode for me. One of the kids is talking about Ms. Zorsky, and he goes, yeah, she's sick. She's gonna be okay, but she has to stay home for a few days. And it's like, kids don't talk like that. Like, that was just for exposition, so I kind of call BS on that line. I do find it interesting and kind of frustrating how Carl and Hoodsey have been so Brandon-focused and less Blake-focused this season. I find their dynamic with Blake to be far more interesting than their dynamic with Brandon, but maybe that's just me.
Yeah, you're right. There's been a lot more focus on for Brandon, at least in the past couple of weeks. You know, for example, we've had New Girl in Town, in which they have to go to Brandon's birthday party. We've had Next Question, in which, you know, they go over to Brandon's place so they can get close to the groundhog. We've had Never Can Say Goodbye, in which they help Brandon find Mr. Licorice when he goes missing. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There's been a lot of focus on Brandon throughout this season. I think there's been at least just as much or maybe slightly more episodes focusing with Brandon than with Carl Hoodsie and Blake.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, in this one, Brandon and Mr. Licorice are going to a pet show, and they are training for various talents to see which one of them works. And Brandon wants to dress up Mr. Licorice in a sailor suit, and he plays the piccolo, and he's absolutely miserable. He kind of hints throughout the episode that he is, not really liking the way that he's being treated. Now, this is another stock plot that we've seen. This happened in Doug, in which Doug wants to win the dog show the pet competition against Roger, and he's pushing Porkchop to win the competition, to do all these things, and Porkchop is miserable, and he doesn't realize it until the end of the episode. There's a SpongeBob episode in which SpongeBob is training Gary for the snail race, and he's pushing him so hard that he pretty much just falls apart and gets weakened. So this is another one of those stock episodes, and man, it's just so not interesting whatsoever. And it's a bit of a downer at the end.
Yeah, it really is. What this episode did bless me with is the idea that Carl might become like an agent or some sort of talent scout or manager in the future, which would make so much sense for him.
Yeah, that'd be kind of fun. It's like, I see potential in you, kid. Let's see if we can get you to do some acts for us. Get any better for Ginger's plot, in which the teacher is just so incredibly unlikable, and then the students are just so fed up that they want to TP her house, and everybody's in, even Macy wants to get in, which actually shocks me. It's like, Macy, pure-hearted, good girl Macy, wants to be involved in TPing a teacher's house. It's like, wow, this is really serious.
Yeah, it's, the sort of groupthink with the kids gets pretty out of control.
Yeah, and it gets even worse when they find out that Ms. Zorsky is being quarantined at the hospital, and she has to stay there for 3 weeks. And so the students are even more miserable that they decide, in addition to TPing her house, they're going to throw eggs at her. And Ginger, then she realizes, okay, this is not right. I agreed to the TPing, but I did not agree to the egg throwing. And she pretty much just calls herself out, and all the students pretty much call her a traitor.
Yeah, they turn on her pretty quick. I, for one, don't see a huge difference between the eggs and the TPing, but the fact that Ginger has a line is, admirable. And there is a great moment where they, arrive at the substitute teacher's house, and they start TPing, and they're about to throw the eggs when she opens the door, and Ginger throws her body in front of it, blocking the eggs, and she isn't ultimately rewarded for it because she, is a pariah immediately because of it. And the teacher doesn't even really thank her or anything. We don't get much closure on it at all, and it just feels like Ginger made a mistake when really I think she did the right thing.
I mean, you would expect a thank you. It's like, oh, Ginger, thank you so much for saving me from being pelted with eggs by these mean kids. But no. Right. It pretty much is like, oh no, I see this stuff all the time. This isn't the first time that kids TP my house. You just have to put up with it until your next job. It's like, screw you, lady. Seriously.
Yeah, but she definitely is based on real teachers that I've had. There are people like that who get into education, and it's uncomfortable, but true.
Yeah, but still, at least Ginger should have at least gotten a little thanks or maybe a little acknowledgement, but no, she gets nothing. So now she pretty much has no acknowledgement from the teacher, and all the students, basically turn on her because she betrayed them, and Ginger was in a lose-lose situation. Now she has pretty much nothing.
That's true.
And so then we go over to the pet show, and man, it's like a full-blown disaster. Brandon plays the piccolo, Mr. Licorice isn't dancing, and everybody is booing at him.
Right. Have you ever played the video game Banjo-Tooie, Patricia?
Briefly.
Sequel to Banjo-Kazooie. I grew up on both of those games, and the piccolo lick, the little melody that he's playing, starts out note for note from the level Jolly Roger's Bay in Banjo-Tooie. It goes do-da-dee-da-da-da-da-da, and then the theme continues differently, but that just, for a moment, I was like, oh my god, is this going to be the Jolly Roger Bay level on Banjo-Tooie? And it wasn't. I hope someone else out there heard that, because I feel like I might be going crazy.
So yeah, so even when Mr. Licorice picks up the piccolo and he plays it himself, nobody's impressed with it. They still boo, and they pretty much lose the competition, and Brandon is like really disappointed, and then Carl gives him a great lesson about how you shouldn't make Mr. Licorice something he's not, which we already learned this lesson. Remember the episode Never Can Say Goodbye, in which Mr. Licorice ran away for that same reason, that Brandon was over smothering him and trying to make him into something that he wasn't. I mean, sure, it was like for a pet show, but we kind of already did this lesson, you know, to a slightly more different extent because it's a pet show, but still, I mean, I'm not convinced. Ginger pretty much is fed up with it, so she moves her desk from the wall to where it was before, and all the other students are doing it. And she pretty much just lays it out thick to the teacher, saying, "You're not Ms. Zorsky. You don't deserve to be treating us like this. In order for you to get respect, you don't force it. You should earn respect." And she says everything correct to this teacher. She's standing up to this teacher, saying the truth, and what does she end up with? Detention.
Yep, and that's just the end.
Yeah, that's just the end. A big, flaming middle finger of an ending.
Yeah, I was really annoyed by that.
You should take what your teacher does, even if you don't agree with it. Even if the teacher is mean and acts really unorthodox, even if they're not your real teacher, you should put up with it anyway. Or else you're gonna get detention. Ugh! I'm done. I'm done with this episode.
All right, well, thank you guys so much for listening. As always, we've made it through season 2. See you next time.
Bye. All right. Finally, that's done. Oh my god.